All right, I have 4 o'clock, and so we will go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come to this special call meeting of the Board of Education. We will start first to do our roll call to determine our quorum. So if you're present, if you'll say here, Miss Allred.
Here.
Mr. Rivers.
Here.
Dr. McKnight.
Here.
Mr. Peace.
Here.
Mr. Udy will be joining us in a little bit. Dr. Houlihan.
Here.
Superintendent McLean.
Here.
Dr. Myrick.
Good evening or afternoon.
Miss Day.
Here.
Dr. Winborn.
Hello, here. Good evening.
And Attorney Dubison. I think I saw her.
Yes,
right.
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Dr. McKnight, will you offer our invocation for us?
Absolutely. Let us bow. Heavenly Father, in our hearts, we plan our course, but we pray that you establish our steps. I pray that we seek you for advice and let us not make decisions based upon what we know, but let us act based upon your wisdom. We ask that you guide our decisions as we place this meeting in your hands. Let our decisions be in the best interest of Granville County children and educators. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Amen.
All right, I've asked Miss Lynn if she will lead us in the pledge in Mr. Udy's place. So, Miss Lynn.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so first up, Dr. McLean, a report from our superintendent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to our board members, staff, guests, and friends of the school district. This afternoon, I'm pleased to have everyone join us for our special board meeting. To begin, tomorrow is a special day for our literacy work in Granville County Public Schools. It marks the first day of the book bus. Now, this year will be a little different in that the books the children select will be theirs to keep for their own personal home libraries, thanks to our partnership with Scholastic and other donations, as well as what our district is doing to try to honor social distancing. Please expect social distancing guidelines to be followed when you visit with us, and please come, bring the students, as we continue to focus on literacy and reading this summer in Granville County Public Schools. Information with times and locations, as well as dates, can be found on our website and on posters throughout the community. I would like to thank all volunteers in advance. Last week, it was reported that our summer meal service program was going so well that we had already served over 25,000 meals this summer. I would like to thank our child nutrition and transportation programs and employees for their work to make certain we were providing quality meal service this summer. 7-day food service is distributed each Tuesday at 9 sites throughout our community. Please visit our website and our flyers throughout the community for specific information. Now, tonight's topics include information on how the state of North Carolina, and more specifically, Granville County Public Schools, might re-enter the 2021 school year, which is slated to begin August 17th, except for our early college students who are scheduled to begin August 5th. In returning our pupils to school, properly balancing academics with student and staff safety remains a top priority for our district. So tonight, staff will share an array of findings and information to assist our board in having a conversation around possible preferences for our community after the governor declares his statewide decision on July 1st. Our Board of Education will also review budget-related items for the 2021 school year. I would like to thank everyone for joining this afternoon. And Mr. Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Dr. McLean. Any questions for the superintendent related to her report? All right, so next we'll move into our topic for tonight, re-entry. 3.01 is an update from our executive staff, so I'll let you lead off with that and then have our other staff contribute to that.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Mr. Richardson. This is one of our main reports this evening, so if you'll allow me to indulge for just a moment, I will be giving the general update with the assistance of a few colleagues. So Ms. Lauren Curtis, if you'll get ready. Let me begin. Board members and guests. This afternoon, we will share with you general information as it pertains to re-entry for your consideration as it relates to joint reopening plans from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the Governor's Office, and their work in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services and the CDC requirements for school districts. There were 3 plans required by all school systems in an effort to plan for one of 3 approaches to begin the new school year. Plan A consists of minimal social distancing. Plan B, where we will spend the bulk of our time this evening, consists of moderate social distancing. And we're spending a great deal of time here this afternoon because it is where we're confronted with the bulk of our challenges, because in order for us to balance academics as well as DHHS recommendations and requirements, we need some guidance. And then there is Plan C, which is remote learning. And we have a few challenges there, but remote learning requires us to place some additional orders and to refine and to get a little better at doing some things we just did. But all of this is wrapped in a package where we want to make certain our board has quality information so that after the governor speaks and makes a decision for the entire state on July 1st, we will meet to have our board talk about what it is we will do locally. This is where guidance is needed this afternoon. So we will be sharing an array of slides this afternoon for consideration and a conversation, hence this afternoon's presentation. Our staff will be listening more than talking after we share our presentation so that we will take your thoughts, comments, and questions and combine it with the results from our staff and parents. We've sent out several surveys in bringing you recommendations for consideration on July 2nd, which will follow the governor's statewide announcement again on July 1st. I would like to remind everyone that our board may decide to be more stringent than the governor, but not more flexible. As such, staff will continue forwarding helpful, reliable guidance, articles, and research our board might find helpful in making a decision for our school district. I would also like to remind everyone that across our nation, the word flexibility has been extremely important in this unprecedented process. As things change and as more is learned, our district's ability to be nimble, flexible, and responsive to whatever changes at hand at the time will be critical for our students and their families. Without further ado, allow me to introduce tonight's team. We will begin with some data from the surveys that have gone out as of late. Lauren Curtis will be assisting with that portion of tonight's presentation. We will then provide some academic information. Dr. Myrick and his team will be providing that. Dr. Winborn will be providing operational data. Ms. Day will be providing financial data. And then Attorney Dubeson will be providing the most recent legal updates for your consideration. And then we will provide for you some plans for consideration as we look at what if the governor chooses Plan B? What could that potentially look like in our community? What would that mean for our schools? And Ms. Curtis is going to help walk us through some research, some conversations, some ideas. We've been in conversation. Our reentry teams have been in conversations. I've been in conversations. Lots of us have been researching options for us to consider. So no decisions will be made this evening, just lots to consider and for you to have conversation. So allow me to begin with Miss Lauren Curtis. Lauren, let me turn it over to you, please. Lauren, you are muted, dear.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McLean. Thank you, board members. Dr. Myrick is going to be my driver tonight. He's going to, if you can go ahead to the next slide, Dr. Myrick, we're ready to get started. As Dr. McLean just said, the state has required us, as we spoke about last time, to create 3 plans. So the first plan is the most like traditional school, Plan A, minimal social distancing. Everyone will be able to return, but we would have some enhanced safety protocols. Then there's reopening Plan B. We would have to find a way to limit the amount of students in our building to 50% or fewer. That's the one that is causing us the most work and headaches, and determining what's the best way to do this to meet student needs while also keeping everybody safe and healthy. If we're doing that option, Dr. Madeline, if we're doing that option, go back, Dr. Mark. Then students will be in school part of the time and then working at home part of the time in a blended environment. Some face-to-face, some remote, and that is called blended. Then the final is Plan C. That's what we did this spring, but we're working to improve upon that. And we've got some to share with you tonight about how we're improving our approach to remote learning. So those are the 3 options the state is requiring us to have. And now we want to talk about what we're going to provide in Granville County schools. So go ahead, Dr. Myrick. So the first is option 1. That is face-to-face learning at our students' base school. So again, that could be with minimal social distancing when everybody returns, or moderate social distancing when they would spend part of the time face-to-face and part of the time working at home on assignments in a blended environment. Option 2 is a virtual option where students are still enrolled at their base school, but they are doing all of their learning at home. Students will receive the instruction from the teachers at their school. They'll have the option to return to face-to-face or blended at their base school following the first semester. The assignments are online and grades and attendance are taken. And then option 3 is blended learning at Granville Academy. This is an existing option for us, but we want to open it up to more families that may be interested in this time. In K-8, we know that at Granville Academy, students attend school 2 days a week and have an at-home learning advisor that helps do the lessons with the students. So a trusted adult in their home to help them with that. And then in 9-12, that's fully online, unless students are not working at standard, in which case they come in for some face-to-face support sessions. So we did do some surveying of parents. We've done several surveys. Our most recent one, and this is our data as of this afternoon, had more than 3,000 responses, which is a fantastic response rate for our district. We asked them 2 simple questions. If the state enters Plan A or Plan B, and again, on July 1, we'll know where the governor is going to point us. But if we end up in Plan A or Plan B, what is your preferred learning option for your child? And so 55% of folks said face-to-face. Almost 28% chose the virtual learning at their child's base school, and 15.5 selected Granville Academy, and then we got a small percentage, a little more than 1% said they're not planning on their child to return at this time. Go ahead, Dr. Meyer. We also asked if we have to enter Plan B, what is the parent's preference for face-to-face instruction? We had, most folks chose alternating days, so an A day, B day, about 44%, about 29% or almost 30% chose alternating weeks, and then about 26% preferred to alternate some students in the morning, some students in the afternoon. That is it for my part this time. Anything else, Dr. McLean, you'd like me to share from the survey data?
From the survey data, that will be fine. Let's move to the academic data. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Curtis. Dr. Myrick.
Yes, okay, I'm coming up now. Keep hitting the wrong button, I'm sorry. There we go. So with academics, our Jumpstart remediation plan that we discussed with the board at the beginning of the month, we found out over the weekend that it has been approved by DPI. So we're very excited about that. It was due last Monday on the 22nd. Athletics are expected to start with workouts this coming Monday, July the 6th. Right now, we are still waiting further guidance with band and chorus. And with all of our plans, we are addressing social, emotional, and mental health needs, along with servicing our special needs students, such as our academically and intellectually gifted students, our exceptional children students, our English learners, and our family. And we are focusing also on family and community engagement. The remote instruction plan is due on July the 20th. There are 15 components to this plan. Each plan will include a hard copy packet option for families without internet. We're working very hard to make sure that we can keep all of our students engaged, even if they are not able to access work remotely. Grades and feedback will be given for in-class, online, and paper pencil assignments. Attendance will be tracked. We will have state and local assessments this year. They will be given. Support for students with specialized learning needs will be supplied as well. We are planning pre-assessment to identify individual student needs and learning gaps. Support for caregivers in giving academic and technology assistance to students is also going to be a priority for us, as well as providing learning and instructional resources for teachers to support learning. That professional development piece is going to be extremely important for our teachers as we move forward. Moving on now to our student services department, we're focusing on social emotional supports for all of our students in this virtual environment, and also providing virtual mental health services for students when they need it. I'm going to turn it over now to Ms. Lofton.
Sure. So for technology, oops, sorry, can you go back one? Thank you. For technology, we're focusing on purchasing touchscreen Chromebook devices for all K2 students. So that would make us one-to-one K-12. We're looking at identifying the best MiFi options for Granville County students that would help us address connectivity and equity concerns. And we're investigating the best locations to place some Wi-Fi rangers as we tried out this at the end of the school year, if we want to continue using those in the fall.
I'd like to go back one slide, if we may, Dr. Myrick. There was one area that was of great concern. Our parents were thrust into becoming facilitators of student learning, just like teachers were thrust right into these remote teachers. What we want to do is also provide parental support, no matter what the learning environment. That parent piece, we know this go around, if the governor chooses remote, we are going to have to provide some type of support, not just to students and staff, but to parents as well. So I just wanted to point that out with the plan this time. Thank you for that.
Dr. McLean, I believe that is all for curriculum and instruction and student services.
Thank you. Let's move to operations. This is an important component of the plan because this is where the crux of the matter comes with keeping everyone safe. So Dr. Winborn.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. So board members, you'll see here there are 5 different categories that we've outlined in operations, areas of planning and focus where teams have been working on. The first is personal protection equipment for students and staff. When the governor made his recent press release about postponing moving into stage 3, he also made an announcement that masks would not only be required for everyone in the public, but that they would be required for staff and all students grades 6 through 12 when and if we return in the fall. And they strongly recommend that these would be required, or they strongly recommended that they would be provided for children in grades K-5. In addition to masks, we're also looking at a lot of other different types of equipment. Clear face shields are things that many of our staff, particularly in the lower grade levels, most likely will want to wear to protect themselves. And then, of course, we're also going to need to have access to gloves and gowns and things like that, just as needed. I will just say briefly here, the guidance we've gotten from the state thus far suggests that we should be either providing 5 cloth face masks per student or look at a disposable face mask solution. This, of course, could get very expensive. So we have begun to stockpile a large supply already, but depending on which plan is implemented in the fall, we will need to take some different action that could, it could result in a large difference in funding allocation, depending on which model we go with. So that's just something we're watching very closely. For screening and temperature checks, those of course are going to need to occur daily. We've purchased almost 300 digital handheld thermometers. We've got those in stock. And of course, we're working with our school nurses and our health department to set up processes for how that's going to work. We're also researching the infrared scanner technology. These are devices that could be placed at the entrance to schools. So we're looking at maybe piloting that at 1 or 2 locations throughout the district to see how that works, to see if it's a good return on the investment. Next, we have cleaning. This is a huge process. It's going to happen daily, of course, continuously. But we are looking at maybe trying to integrate some deep clean days into some of these models, and you'll see more about that later. But of course, this is going to require training, setting up some special protocols and schedules, and then relying on everyone, all employees, to play a part in the cleaning of our campuses and our buses, not just our custodians. With regard to child nutrition, instead of children traveling from their classroom to the cafeteria, we're probably going to be looking at a plan of some sort where the meals will be brought more to the children, bagged lunches or grab and go type things, little clamshell packages, just trying to limit the amount and frequency of interaction with children while they're at school. Of course, if we do have some alternating schedules, we're going to have to think about feeding not just the children that are in our schools that day, but all of those that are at home. We need to make sure that they receive nutritious meals every day as well. And then finally, transportation. This is posing a particular challenge, and there have been some recent changes about this. The governor recently clarified that we could place as many as 1 child per seat on a bus. This could mean, and I'll show you in just a minute, there's some diagrams, but this could mean as many as 24 students could fit on a bus for any given route. Our transportation department is analyzing and running some scenarios based on this to see if our fleet of buses and our our list of bus drivers is long enough to accommodate this. We may be looking at running multiple routes, like back-to-back routes, so that we can get enough children to school. Dr. Mark, if you'll go to the next slide. This is a potential bus seating configuration for one of our standard buses. And the numbers, the red dots represent children. And you can see here that we could only place one per seat. Unless, of course, you had siblings, they could sit together. That's permitted. But you know, you're looking at a situation where you've got 24 children. That's assuming everything goes as planned. If you'll go to the next slide, Dr. Mark, this is a scenario where, let's say a bus driver pulls up and does a temperature check on a child, and he or she has a fever, or let's say the child doesn't have a face mask. You would then need to place that child in a seat, which would be in this case number 13, the little blue dot, where you would have to provide vacant seats around that child so that other children would be socially distanced in a safe setting. So one sick child or one child that was symptomatic or of that nature could prevent capacity issues. And then you can imagine what the ripple effect would be on that particular route. You know, we wouldn't want to we can't leave the child on the side of the road. I mean, we need to take care of everyone. And but then what do you do about the rest of the children that are scheduled to be on that route? Because your capacity on the bus would then be impacted. And then, of course, this raises questions about, you know, what if that child then tests positive? And then what happens to that bus driver? That bus driver is then quarantined. So we're down a bus driver. And that becomes quickly a staffing issue, which is another big concern. And that is a good segue into our next category under operations, which is human resources. And Mr. Perry, I'm gonna turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about this.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. With human resources, we want to make sure that our employees are safe, just as with our students, in an environment where they feel comfortable. There are some options that are presented to our employees. There's the Families First through the CARES Act for the emergency family leave and emergency paid sick leave that some of our employees will have an opportunity to participate in. At this point, we're not sure if all of our employees will be able to return to work because some of them are considered to be at risk for themselves and have some underlying health issues that may jeopardize their own health and safety. They may be able to use their own accrued leave, and their accommodations may be available to some, and possibly alternative work assignments. So we're carefully exploring our options when it comes to our employees, as we want to make sure that our employees are back in a safe environment. We're still working through the substitutes and how to make sure that our substitutes, if they are in the building, they are following the same guidelines and regulations, and making sure that they are trained to be able to adhere to policies and protocols that are necessary to be safe in our schools as well. As you know, the CDC is constantly updating the information in regard to at-risk employees. So we're carefully monitoring that list and making sure that if our employees are eligible for types of leave, that we are informed of those leaves and able to assist them as possible. So we definitely want to make sure that we prevent any outbreaks among our students and staff, and ensuring that the environment is conducive for everyone. So certain additional duties, we are still working through the state and providing guidelines with how we would operate with band and chorus and other different kinds of extracurricular activities. So we'll continue to monitor and rely on the guidance from the state.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I might just add quickly that some of you may have seen some recent studies and surveys where close to a half of staff may have some issues of some sort in returning. I don't know that there's any hard research out there yet, but there's certainly enough indications that it can give you, it could create some serious issues for service delivery if a third or a half of our staff were unable or unwilling to report to work because of the risks to their personal health and safety. So we're going to, again, be watching that very closely. And I know Ms. Dubison has been wonderful in providing us guidance about that. Just today, we received some additional resources from her. So again, that's just something Jamar and his team and myself will be working on very closely. That's all for operations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Day.
That's the most concise slide I've ever seen.
That's not my slide. So let me,
I hated to chuckle.
it's on board docs. Can,
Would you like me to share my screen?
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
The first one, the first document, reentry. So good afternoon, board members. For the financial update related to reentry, you have a document on board docs with the funding we have received related to COVID-19. If you'll go on down to the next slide. As you can see, there are several different pots of money with restricted specific uses for each. Also, each has a specific time frame when these funds are available. I want to talk a little more about the funding which is set to expire tomorrow, June 30th. Those are the state COVID-19 funds. So that's the second line on that first slide, which $298,533. And then on the second slide, there's the funding for child nutrition, $354,509. So as far as the state COVID funds, that $298,533, although we have faced some challenges with the use of the funds, we have fully expended the state COVID funds for PPE, for devices, for remote learning and cleaning supplies. The funding for child nutrition on the second page of the first row, last week we received official notification and official guidance on the use of these coronavirus relief funds for school nutrition. Yes, I did say last week on Monday, we received official guidance on how to use those funds that expire on or set to expire on June 30th. Last Wednesday evening, we had a webinar to provide additional clarification. Based on the guidance, we cannot use these funds nor the state COVID-19 supplemental funds to double dip or make a profit for the child nutrition program. There's a specific calculation of whether the meal service program had a loss and could therefore use the funds for typical expenditures. Based on that calculation, Granville County Public Schools meal site program did not operate in a loss status. Therefore, we are only eligible to use these funds for what the state calls atypical expenditures. The hazard pay for our non-child nutrition staff that worked in the program are considered an atypical expenditure and could be paid from these funds. I will say House Bill 1035, which would extend the deadline for use of these funds, has passed the House and the second read in the Senate back on June 17th, but has not been ratified. Given the compliance and timing challenges, we were able to spend $36,000 of the $354,000. And if the funds are approved to carry over, we would have the potential use of those funds. The remaining funds carry over. The other sources of funds, you see that go back the first slide, the CARES Act funding, that is our largest pot of funding. Those federal funds carry over through September 30th, 2021. And I will say there are a lot of compliance requirements associated with those funds and specific ways that those funds have to be used, budgeted, purchases made, those kind of things. but the other funds are set to expire December 30th. And you can see the amount that we received for computers, for school personnel, and for student devices, as well as for internet connectivity. And these are the funds that we have received, the allotments we have received to date. And then the Jumpstart, that last $358,000 is the Jumpstart funds that we received. I'll be glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Day. We appreciate that.
Dr. McLean, may I mention one thing? This is Eva.
Please do.
And Ms. Day, the legislation that you were tracking, you were right, did not pass, but they actually, that extension got inserted into another bill, which did pass. So the extension for the food service funds until December 30th was ratified as part of Senate Bill 113.
Great.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Attorney Dubison. All right.
Ms. Day, I do have a question. Do the CARE funds pass through the charter schools too, or do they get something separate?
No, that is our allocation. There is a question about those funds and private schools. And I know Attorney Dubison knows more about that, but they don't pass, that is our allocation, Granville County Schools allocation.
Yes, those funds are allocated using the system that is used for Title I. And so my understanding is that charter schools get their own separate allocation, but that the school system provides equitable participation for private schools, which generally is provided in the form of in-kind good, like educational materials or services, as opposed to cash. And in some districts, that's a lot of money. Granville County does not have a big private school participation, so it's not a significant portion for Granville County.
Thank you.
All right. If we can go to our legal updates, Attorney Dubison, you're up next.
Great, and I'm going to try here to share my screen. Just a second. Okay, did that work?
I don't see it yet.
Oh, wait.
There you go.
It's
Okay.
coming. Yes, we see it now.
So I just wanted to update you on a few discrete legal issues, and then I'm certainly here to answer questions. Dr. Winborn has already mentioned the face covering mandate that was part of the last executive order, and DHHS did extend that to school staff, adult visitors, and middle and high school students. Not required for elementary students, but encouraged. And of course, this may be updated by the time school starts for traditional calendar, but there are schools that could start earlier for year-round calendars. So this is, they wanted to have some guidance in place right now. This requirement can be waived if there is an exception that applies. The one that we're really going to be paying attention to is anyone who cannot tolerate a cloth face covering due to developmental, medical, or behavioral needs. And we will work together on determining a plan for those folks. Obviously, it depends to some extent on if they are an adult or a child, and what their job or classroom schedule is as to how that can be accommodated. But I know that, staff are thinking about, especially for children with medical needs or special needs, how they will address those who cannot wear a face mask. A couple of legislative updates. There was, as you may have read, a flurry of activity in the legislature last week and specifically Thursday night. And a couple of education-related things were passed through. One was Senate Bill 113, which I just mentioned, which did include the extension of the COVID-related child nutrition funds. It also contained a revision of the previous COVID-19 Relief Act with regard to scheduling remote instruction. Previously, we had the COVID-19 Relief Act, which was the law that required you to adopt a new calendar that contained 5 scheduled remote learning days, which was really more about practicing remote learning in a planned way, not intended to address health or safety needs. But it was written in such a way that it potentially limited your ability to, even though the governor has been saying school systems can open on a more restrictive basis, it wasn't clear that they could because of how that legislation was written. So the legislature did revise that to state that school boards can schedule additional remote instruction if the board determines that it's needed to ensure the health or safety of students. In accordance with your remote instruction plan. It does state that the public school unit should ensure that it's in compliance with all required COVID-19 guidance that's issued by the state board, DPI, and DHHS. And we are all thinking and communicating about what that means and what guidance might be required, because that's not necessarily a distinction that has always been clear, but what we do know is that DPI has said that their guidance up until now is recommended, not requirements, but DHHS has issued a number of things that they have labeled as required. And another bill that passed through last week, I have not seen that this has been ratified by the governor yet, but it did pass both houses, allocated a lot of additional COVID relief funds, most of which did not have to do with public schools, but there was an allocation for personal protective equipment for schools, specifically to facilitate in-person instruction, and an allocation for additional funding for exceptional children who have lost services as a result of COVID-19. So those are just some of the legislative action that we have seen. The legislature has gone home and is not supposed to be back until, is it early September, August? So whether they might come back early, I suppose is possible, but for now they have gone home. And that's what I had for this evening. Dr. McLean. You're muted.
There. Thank you, Attorney Jewison. It was a whirlwind of a week. Things were changing swiftly and quickly and right up to the 11th and 12th hour in the legislature. So thank you for that. All right, now it is time, everyone, let's just take a deep breath. We are now going to present, based on all of those pieces, some information for consideration and for your conversation this evening. Ms. Curtis, let me turn it back over to you. I think you have one more piece of survey data to share, and that is from staff, and then the plans. Is that correct? The plans for our board to take a look at. Is that correct?
That is correct. Dr. Margaret, if you go back up a couple of slides, I inserted that staff survey data. Go back one more. So we also surveyed our staff regarding their preferences for, around Plan A and B. So same questions that we asked the parents. If the state chooses Plan A or B, then GCPS plans to offer 3 learning options for families, face-to-face, blended, and full-time virtual. And like our parents, our staff would prefer to be face-to-face if possible. Dr. Mark, next slide. If we are in Plan B, how do they prefer to alternate the schedules? And again, like our families, the indication was that they would prefer the A day, B day schedule, so alternating days. So we're going to show you at this time a few options for Plan B, because Plan A is really clear. We go back to school, we follow the rules that DHHS has given us, but we have everybody in the building. Plan C is very clear. Everybody stays home. We follow our remote instruction plan. Plan B offers us a lot of opportunities to be creative in how we think about servicing students and families. We are going to share 3 ideas with you today. We also have sent you guys some articles to inform your thinking over the next few days as we anticipate the decision from the governor on the 1st. And if he chooses B, we want to be prepared with you all to make the decision that's best going to meet the needs of our students in our community. So we're going to share 3 options today. The first is alternating days, then option 2 is alternating weeks, and then option 3 will be alternating times of the day. So you can go ahead, Dr. Myrick. So this is alternating days, and based on some research that we've done, we determined that having 2 consecutive days instead of having 2 non-consecutive days face-to-face would be better for our students. So this option shows you on Mondays and Tuesdays, Group A would be face-to-face and Group B would be remote. On Thursdays and Fridays, Group A would be remote and Group B would be face-to-face. On Wednesdays, all students would be remote. This would allow for some intensive cleaning by our custodial and maintenance staff, as well as our other staff in the building that are going to need to support that. It would also allow teachers to do planning, provide feedback to students on the remote work that they've been doing throughout the week, plan with their peers, and participate in professional development. Another advantage of a schedule like this is if we have students that have more intensive learning needs, specialized learning needs, they could come to school more than twice a week. This would allow them to come face-to-face based on their needs up to 4 times per week. So that is an option for alternating days, and I put up at the top, just as a reminder for you, that about 43% of our parents listed this as their preference for how we alternate. So that was the leader when we surveyed parents about which type of alternation they would prefer. And we're going to go through all 3 options and then give you guys some time to discuss. So we'll look at option 2 now, Dr. Myrick.
Well, give them a moment to just kind of let's go back and let's let them take a look.
Okay.
Let's let our board take a look. And many configurations of this can occur. We're talking with other districts about what they're doing. Some come one day, another group comes the next. Teacher concerns around being in contact with everyone, the cleanliness in between groups, and if you have to backward of who was in contact with whom, trying to keep groups together, and things of that nature come into play. So this is an attempt at trying to address all of those.
Dr. McLean?
Yes.
A couple of questions about this. So on Thursday, let's see, on Wednesdays, there would be remote learning for all, planning and so on and so forth. How does it work out with all this related to the number of hours that have to be completed each year?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that, Lauren. Let's talk a little bit about what we learned in that area. The seat time is no more seat time, but we do have enough time there to make a schedule like this happen. You want to chime in, or Dr. Myrick, someone from our instructional team? That has been an area, Dr. Houlihan, where we've done a little homework. Mm-hmm. Anyone want to chime in?
I mean, the remote instruction time can count as instructional time. And I don't know if someone from our remote instruction team wants to talk about that a little bit more, but that remote learning time can count.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is if they're remote learning on Wednesdays, and there's PLCs and other kinds of things going on, will that be rotated? How will that be done on that Wednesday?
So not all of that time would be used for PLCs or teachers meeting
Right.
with other teachers. So part of that day would be for teachers to do some of the same things that we did in the spring. So doing some of those connection sessions where they were meeting with individuals or small groups. Some of that could be used for students to do some, instead of synchronous learning where they are all doing it at the same time, it may be asynchronous learning where they can pull up and view something at a time in their schedule that works best for them and their family. So lots of options for how we can provide instruction on those days.
Okay, and Lauren, one last question. Is the intensive cleaning on Wednesdays, is the concept of intensive cleaning basically a requirement by the state or expected to do this, or is this just what we're doing ourselves?
I might let Dr. Winborn speak a little bit more about that, but we do want to have some different, I'm gonna let Dr. Winborn speak about that.
Sure, that's a great question. You know, on a daily basis, we're going to be cleaning all of the frequently touched surfaces in the building.
Right.
But say on that, when Monday and Tuesday, if all of the A day students leave, we would be going in and cleaning probably all of the floors, windows, walls. It would be, you know, the bathrooms would get a full, like, floor to ceiling clean. Just spending more time using more disinfectant, hitting the surfaces that would not be cleaned as frequently on the other days. So it's more labor intensive, Dr. Houlihan. It just more time, more cleaning solution being used, that type of thing.
Okay, you didn't answer my question.
Sorry.
I think I can answer your question, Dr. Houlihan.
Okay.
If your question was, is this deep cleaning an external requirement?
Right.
The DHHS guidance that we've had so far does include among its requirements that schools establish a schedule for routine environmental cleaning and disinfection of high-touch areas, and increase frequency of disinfection and disinfect all shared objects between uses. So school supplies, gym equipment, all of that stuff, not books, but other learning equipment. And so that is going to, I assume that is part of what they would be doing on Wednesday. So there's not a requirement that you have a schedule like this. You can schedule it however you want, but there is a requirement for enhanced cleaning.
Okay. But there is an expectation that we do that, every school system do that, the intensive thing at least sometime during the week.
They don't talk about how often, just that, but the fact that it has to happen between uses and in general that you're supposed to have a schedule that is more intensive than you would usually have.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I think the main thinking behind it, Dr. Land, too, is just that you're changing between two different cohorts of kids. So if there was an outbreak, you could sort of put a firewall between when the kids were at the school and be relatively confident that, you know, the coronavirus wasn't still present in the building for the next fresh group of children that arrived.
Thank you.
Dr. McLean, if I could also just mention, I know that there's some districts, and we've even talked about this too, where it's not just A day and B day, but maybe there might be a B, and C day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Several things could be considered here is what I want to point out. Again, it's that balance between safety and academics. The board has a unique opportunity with this. But that balance, I think Dr. Houlihan hit on something, is when do we get it all done? And it's that cleanliness and safety. You know, we are going to send the board also, and Lauren, you've got to help me remember to do that later this week. I think it's time to probably close down the teacher survey, but we got some unique comments And a large majority of the comments were about my safety as the instructor. You know, what about the safety of being around so many people, meaning colleagues, students, you know, staff from so many different environments, and we're wanting to take all of that into consideration. And then parents, what are you going to do to keep my youngster safe? Again, being around young people from so I think that was the purpose behind some of that intensive cleaning language as well. A real effort to try to put forth, when are we going to really get in there at least once a week? I wish it could be every day. And that balance of custodians, you heard some language about, you know, folk we have on campus who could do it. And that's why we're all going to have to pitch in as well. Great piece.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes. I think that's Mr.
Okay.
Rivers.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you all doing?
Great.
I know this is challenging, and there's just no perfect plan. And I'm just going to toss out a couple of things regarding the intensive cleaning. Everything I'm reading, and I really tried to study a lot to prepare for this meeting, is showing that the virus will not survive long on doorknobs. They initially thought it would, and now the latest I've heard is no, it doesn't. So, you know, intensive cleaning once a week, to me, just doesn't seem to be accomplishing anything. Obviously, if we could, the way to really do it, but we can't do it, but we can try, is to clean after every use, you know, so that'd be after every class, after every student touched something, and that's almost unrealistic. But one day a week of intensive cleaning, you know, the next day, likely the virus has already past its viable state by the time they do that intensive cleaning from overnight. So I don't see personally from my research and my reading the value of that. If that's what's driving taking a day off during the week, I would think we might want to think about that. And here's why: that the comments I received from parents regarding this spring and the remote learning this spring, the overwhelming comments, in fact, almost unanimous, were they did not have enough instructional time with teachers. In some cases, parents told me their child only got 1 hour a week. And that's just not going to work. That's just almost not worth doing in many respects. Losing a day, I think, is unfortunate because they're only getting 2 days of face-to-face a week as it is. The other question is, and I defer to you all, but I'm just thinking out loud here. Rather than go 2 days in a row, was there any thought given to alternating? A group goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week, Tuesday, Thursday the next week. B group Tuesday, Thursday first week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The thought being that they get a day of instruction, they get a day to do homework, they get a day of instruction. In this case, you're going to have basically a 5-day gap between face-to-face. Is there any research or anything that shows why that is a more valuable way of trying to teach? I mean, obviously, if we have to go to Plan B and we have to go to this option, it's not going to be the best that we could get. So I think we need to try to optimize getting the most face-to-face time with teachers. So those would be the two questions I had.
Absolutely, Mr. Rivers, and thank you for that. Certainly, the first answer would be absolutely and certainly. What parents said to us was it would be difficult for them for their work schedules to tell their bosses, this week I need 3 days off, and next week I need 2 days off, and then the following week I need 3 days, and the next week I need 2. So in an effort to try to be a bit more consistent, we lean towards something along this line that would be a little more consistent. This is a response to just trying to help parents with their work schedules.
Right, and so that is important. I agree.
It was a conversation. There were 2 or 3 other things that sort of cropped up. Lauren, would you like to share? Ms.
I
Burns?
think the ability to build a little momentum with your students or work on something a couple of days at a time rather than having the interruption of every other day was something that I saw in the teacher results. Also, for instance, if we give an assessment and we're doing an every other day rotation, then that day, they may not be receiving as much instruction. So the ability to react to that assessment really quickly and come back the next day and give feedback and be able to adapt our instruction really quickly instead of maybe I give an assessment on Monday, they're home for Tuesday, and then I don't see them again until Wednesday. We're not reacting as quickly to those assessments that we're giving. So I think what we heard from teachers is that gives them the flexibility to do something that may take a little bit longer, but also react really quickly to what we're seeing happening in our classrooms.
Thank you. Is there any way we could I guess is the purpose of the Wednesday off, is that really for the intensive cleaning, which Dr. Houlihan asked, and it's not a requirement. And I don't see the scientific value of it. Or is there some other reason to keep it just 2 days a week, so for consistency for the parents?
Mr. Rivers, you all can choose to do just about anything you'd like, to be very honest. Again, these are just their options. We've seen some districts consider Friday being a remote day. We've seen some districts consider some other things. It might be more valuable in our community to do weeks at a time. So again, this is just an option.
Sure, I understand.
Just an option. All right, great questions. Food for thought. Why don't we take a look at option 2 and let's get something else in the hopper as well.
So option 2 is alternating weeks. We did consider presenting this, Mr. Rivers, with a day for remote learning for all as well, to provide some time for cleaning and support for students in smaller groups. But right now we just have put the group A face-to-face 1 week, group B face-to-face the other week, and then again, students with some more intensive or specialized learning needs attending on a daily basis. And then teachers would be face-to-face with one group at one time and remote with one group at another time. I think one of the things our teachers are worried about is when we don't have some sort of additional time, it's going to be very difficult to keep up with both groups if they're teaching face-to-face every day. That's one of the concerns that we heard from them in their survey results. So this is alternating weeks. And again, just to remember what our parents said, about 30% indicated that this would be their preference. Very similar to A day, B day, or alternating days, but alternating weeks instead.
Let's let our board take a look at this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is Mr. Udy. I've been on for a few minutes, just hadn't been able to get in touch with you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting us know. Dr.
McLean.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Rivers.
Thank you. Again, getting back to this intensive cleaning, I don't see that in this model.
It would happen over the weekends and on Fridays because that's when the split would be between the groups. So we would do that on Fridays and over the weekend.
Okay, and I guess I would like some if that's going to drive things, if that's just something we're going to do and it's not going to affect the academic piece of the puzzle, then that's fine. But if this is going to drive scheduling days, then I guess I would like to see some scientific rationale for why we need to take time for intensive cleaning as opposed to our daily cleaning, which is to basically disinfect the high touch areas. Because obviously we're not, well, I guess if you say we're doing on the weekend in this model, I just would like, to understand a little bit more that requirement.
I think what my conversation, if you permit me, Dr. McLean, with some other folks that work with operations in other districts, the thinking was that anytime you change a group one group of students to another is that you just simply try to make this, you take that extra effort to make the school as clean as possible so that if you do have an outbreak, you can limit the contact between the two groups so that you know that if there was an outbreak with group A, that you're confident that your cleaning methods, you know, that extra bit that you gave either in the middle of the week or on the weekend, were able to prevent that possibly from spreading over to the other group. I think that's where the thinking came from. And I know that just in my conversations with folks in other districts. So I don't know that necessarily, you know, there's some clear scientific evidence we can point to, because there'll be some variation in the cleaning methods from school to school just because we'll have different people cleaning, you know?
Right. I understand.
And the
and I
schools
guess,
themselves are different.
sure. I guess, you know, all the evidence I'm seeing, and we know why we have to be so flexible is we know that tomorrow there could be some other study coming out that refutes everything. But everything that I've seen so far says the virus will not survive on a surface, certainly over a weekend. So any intensive cleaning we do on a Friday to save Group A from Group B there's no scientific value to that because the virus can't survive that long without being on a mucous membrane. So I guess I'm just trying to make sure we're basing all this on science and you know, trying to do what's right based on what data we have, recognizing that that might change tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
looking at this from a parent's point of view, I would think that the intensive cleaning would be something that would be more reassuring to a parent who's going to be sending their kid back to school, whether it's needed or not. I would think that I would feel a whole lot better knowing that that effort had been made before my child went back to school. So I'm in total support of the intensive cleaning.
Yes, ma'am.
We saw that in our parent survey results and in our parent focus group that we did a couple of weeks ago. They were very much in favor of knowing that not only were we doing the cleaning practices on a daily basis, but that there was a time and a break between groups to ensure that when one cohort left, there was time to clean and be sure that we're doing everything we can to lower the risk of spreading infection between those groups.
All right, so this seems to be a kind of a sticking point on both sides. Why don't we kind of put a pin in this piece with the cleaning part, and let's continue your options so that this can be something we discuss when we come back to deliberate.
Right. Let's go to option 3. This is the final option we're presenting for consideration this evening.
So this would be option 3, alternating times of day. And a little more than 25% of our parents selected this as their preference. This one allows for the least amount of time to be dedicated to cleaning between groups. It also would probably allow the least amount of instructional time because of the time we would need to take students home, bring students in the other cohort back. So it does limit some of that instructional time during the day, but we did want to present it to you. So half the students would come in the morning face-to-face and have remote learning in the afternoon. The other half would come in the afternoon and have remote learning in the morning. And then it again would allow students with specialized learning needs, we could have them at school all day. But again, choosing this would limit the amount of time we would have for instruction face-to-face because of the transition time between the two groups, and also limit the time and ability to clean between those two cohorts of students.
This was the least popular option of everyone we surveyed. One, because of the amount of time we would have for cleaning in between groups. It is the most expensive option because of transportation. So just wanted to put that out as well, but it is an option. and we wanted to present this. If you look at the pages we sent board members, it is on board docs, the 7 pages. It is one of the options the state presented. So we wanted to put this out for you. These are the 3 options this afternoon. Mr. Chair, I turn it over to you at this time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McLean. Thank you, team, for putting that together. So board, you've been presented with quite a bit of information, and kind of from here, what we want to do is to take maybe some time to deliberate, kind of throw out some questions, comments, concerns. Staff will be taking some notes so that they can mesh some of those concerns and comments together, so that when we come back together July 2nd for our called meeting, we will have some finalized options for you to vote on. And so I don't want to bog us down in any one section, but kind of let's look at if we were having to choose a plan B. It sounds like plan A and C are they are what they are if they are chosen. So if we're looking at plan B, we have 3 options there presented for us. Let's go around the table just to kind of start out with. If you had to choose one of these options, 1, 2, or 3, what would you choose right now? And Ms. Lynn, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can we start with you if you're ready? If you had to choose one of these options, what would you choose?
Well, to me, option 3 would be completely out because of the cost issue. So I would say option 1.
Okay. Mr. Rivers?
I would also agree. Option 1, I think, is the best possible. Plan B is going to be a tough plan to implement, but I would go with option 1 as well.
Okay, Dr. McKnight?
I would go with option 1 right now.
Okay. Mr. Peace?
Option, the one with alternating days,
Okay.
A day and a B day.
Yes, sir, that's option 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Udy?
I don't prefer any of the options in B. I like option A, but if the state does mandate B, then it would have to be 1.
Okay. Dr. Houlihan?
Option B, option 1.
Okay. So it all kind of sounds like, at least at this point, with no other discussion, that just we're all kind of circulating around the alternating days. So one of the things that we've kind of identified as a question, and maybe Dr. Wimborne can work on the next couple of days, can we look and see around that intensive cleaning day, kind of what other districts are thinking, what the science behind it is, kind of whatever groups you may be involved in, how that works with that. Is that something you could work on for us, Dr. Wimborne?
Absolutely, definitely can.
Board, what other questions do you have from this option 1? And this is just gathering information so the staff can get us good information when we come back.
Mr. Chair, how do our extracurriculars factor in, athletics, band, that type of stuff?
Okay, I'm not sure. Dr. McLean, Dr. Wimborne, do you want to speak to that?
Absolutely. Dr. Mark might want to chime in to assist a little bit. We're still waiting on some guidance for a little more information for band and chorus. They have an arts council that has provided some guidance, but right now across the state, we're waiting on a little bit more for band and chorus. Some of our others should be just fine. Some of those other electives should be just fine. The athletic guidance that is being followed for just the initial practice with physical health will probably come into play with health and PE. We have to just be very careful with numbers of children in a space at a time. We don't foresee doing anything outside of what the High School Athletic Association is doing, with physical education, but some of our others should be just fine. Again, with Plan B, we can't have more than 50% anyway in a class if you look at those documents we sent. So again, it's that balance of the safety and the academics. We're just going to make sure that's all in place. Was there something specific though you'd like for us to look into?
No, I was just curious as to how. But if you're right, if we're limited to 50%, then I'm assuming that, let's say for football, half the team who was in Group A would practice on Monday, Tuesday, and the other half would practice on Thursday, Friday, which would play havoc with if half your offense is in Group B and half in Group A. But I mean, we got to do what we're told to do. So that would be very challenging.
Right now, we don't even have the release to do much of anything except just have some small groups at a time. So we're still waiting on additional guidance to go any further than that when it comes to some areas of athletics. But here's what I will do. We have a neat video our athletic directors have put together. And when we get off the call this evening, I will say, let me send you all the video our athletic directors have put together. They will be using for training. I think they did a nice job.
All right, board, what other questions or concerns do you have with this schedule?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
We've been talking about look what we're going to do with the kids at school. I'm concerned about how we're going to get them there.
Yes, sir.
With the number of children that be able to ride the bus at the time, and it's going to take a lot more bus drivers than we have, I do believe.
And if I could just note one thing, I'm not sure was clear. The requirement of one child per seat applies to Plan B. So you're not expected to have one child per seat, but all of the children coming to school. You would presumably have half your children coming to school. Now it's still not
right,
but it's supposed to be during the days that you have at most half.
Dr. Winborn, have you looked at if it's essentially half of the students, what that would look like for transportation?
So the first guidance that we got from the state was that no more than 12 students could be on a school bus at a time. And when we did actually run some scenarios with Tim's, and it was estimated that we would need 335 school buses to do that. So we typically run about 90. So Mr. Peace is exactly right. We have school buses that are full with 3 children per seat, 3 elementary buses with 60 children on them, 63. So going down to 24 would require, at the very least, the doubling up of some routes. And I also, I'm concerned because the situation of screening children before they get onto a bus and the dilemma that you're faced with if there's a problem. Because if you're early on in the route and you admit some children onto the bus that don't have a mask or who are symptomatic, then it limits your ability to finish your route. And then we have children standing out at their bus stop waiting for the bus, but the bus is at capacity and legally can't pick them up because of what's going on. And it creates a lot of, that wasn't me, but excuse the interruption. I know the other issue too, Mr. Peace, is many of our bus drivers, of course, are dual employees. So if they're forced to run those double routes, that cuts into the instructional day when they may be needed to help get the school day going back at school.
But then wouldn't you have to have another adult on the bus that do temperatures and make sure that people did what they needed to do?
We think probably so, Mr. Peace. We think so.
I mean, I don't see how the driver could do all of that. Really?
That's exactly what we've been talking about.
Don't worry.
That's a really good question.
And I do know that our office has been advocating at the state level, and others are as well, for some more clarification about those transportation guidelines. And I hope that we would have them in the next month or so. And specifically consideration of what sort of health screening needs to be done and what can be accomplished through a parent, signature each morning that they have done a check, things like that. So I know that that's something that's being explored.
I have a quick question, I guess. Mr. Chair had a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if someone else was going to ask. I agree with Mr. Peace and with Dr. Winburn. I see the school bus situation as a potential disaster. I think we would have to do a couple of things. I think we would have to require the parents properly attire their children, which means having a mask. I think we'd have to have extra masks with the driver in case a child showed up without a mask. And I think parents would have to understand that there's not necessarily a guarantee their child will be allowed on the bus. I don't think that we could in good conscience take an infected child or a child with a temperature and without a mask on the bus, even if we separated them, by the extra seats you're talking about. They've got to walk by the children to get to that seat. So if we're really concerned about community spread, then we're going to have some pretty stringent rules about bus riding and educate our parents prior to August 17th. The second thing is, a lot of studies came out last week, a study by Brown University, by Harvard, and by, I believe it was New York City's Department of Health. And those studies all agreed and all stated that spread among children was almost non-existent. Of the 30,000 children that were under study in New York City who were kept in daycare provided by the YMCA to support the healthcare workers while they were having to work long shifts and support the hospital crisis, of those 30,000 children that were kept without masks and kept, in close quarters, they had a 0.16% infection rate, or 5 of the 30,000 students actually got COVID, and they don't really know where they got it, but it's almost non-existent. The studies also showed that it's virtually impossible, and this is, I think we need to look into this and make sure we understand it, but it says virtually impossible for a child to give COVID to an adult, which is a huge result that would make our staff and our teachers feel a lot safer. So these are some of the kind of information in the studies that I think it's imperative that the governor puts out and DHS puts out, because these are game-changing results. But I think you're absolutely right. We need more guidance, and the bus is going to be our choke point. So to the extent we have extra masks, and we just tell parents your child may not be allowed on the bus, so the parents are going to have to make arrangements for that. I just don't see a way around it, or it could just be catastrophic for our bus routes.
I understand the point you're coming from, but I think that we need to also understand that we're responsible for those children once they get to the bus stop. And a lot of times kids are left at a bus stop and mom and dad have gone on to work. And so you're right. Transportation is going to be a major choke point, but I think it's one of those that we're going to see more and more of in this community. We have to co-parent with parents sometimes. And I can't see us leaving a kid at a bus stop because of the symptoms. Board members, go ahead.
If we have to disrupt a bus or make a bunch of kids late for school or put them at risk, then I think we're going to have visits with the parent and explain that this is a crisis situation. This isn't business as usual, and it's a different playing field. I mean, somehow we have to be able to operate our buses without admitting children on the bus who shouldn't be on the bus. If we do that, it's not fair to the children who might be exposed, even though the data right now is showing that they can't pass it child to child. So that gets into part of the confusion. You know, we're getting all these studies that we're learning more every day, but these studies are indicating that maybe we don't need to do all this. However, if we don't do those studies, then we shouldn't put our students at risk. So I think there's going to have to be some guidance to parents about, this is what it is.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Say, in dealing with parents, in my years of doing this, there are going to always be some that's going to do exceptions to the rule, whatever the rule is. And we are going, as a school, we are going to be responsible for them. So that kid that has a fever and you got to get on the bus in the morning, if we're going to have to deal with it. It might not be for one, but it might be 20. So, and whatever rules that the governor sets is what we're going to have to deal with. And he's not going to say, if the parent don't do so and so, we can blame them. That can be our responsibility. So we're going to have to prepare for whatever the guidelines are. Of course, we don't know where they're going to be at this point.
Yes, sir. All right. Board members, other comments? All right. Are there any other items off of this Plan B option 1 that you're either just not sure about with the way it's been presented, or you have a question? That way we can instruct the staff to do a little more research for us. Anything else that's sticking out?
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
All right. What I just would like some explanation on is a teacher, when she's teaching Group A and Group B is remote, what does that look like? Is her class being broadcast over the internet, or what are the Group B students supposed to be doing from, say, 7:30 to 3:30 on Monday, when Group A, if we go with option 1, when Group A is in class and the teacher is teaching them face to face, what is Group B doing?
Good question.
Dr. Myrick, I believe, probably.
Yes, that could, if you don't mind, that could actually look several ways. One way it can be there could be synchronous instruction going on where the students could actually log right into the classroom as if they're there. The other way would be a flipped classroom sort of approach, where the days when the students are not in school, the teachers will have recorded lessons for the students to work on, so that when they come back to school, they can pick up where they left off and have an opportunity to respond to those assignments. So those are just 2 ways that we're looking at doing that.
See, that's what concerns me. I don't know how a teacher is going to have enough time to do this. If a teacher's preparing lesson plans, and maybe the lesson plans would be the same for all, but if she's teaching or he's teaching face to face all day long to a Group A, that's a full-time job. I don't see how they can be spending much time doing remote instruction. And if they have to plan and produce recorded lessons, when are they going to have time to do that? I mean, if they're teaching A on Monday, Tuesday, I guess they could do it on Wednesday. But that was one of the complaints parents had this past spring, was that there wasn't enough teaching time. So I'm just concerned how the teachers, if we are in Plan B, how the teachers are going to have enough time in the day to teach. They're not teaching twice as many students, but they essentially are. They're having to teach twice as many classes. And it concerns me that the teachers may not have time or that the remote learning days may need to be something that the child does on their own. I just don't see how a teacher can be two places at once.
Mr. Rivers, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, which is why we, in addition to the intensive cleaning in option one, provided that Wednesday remote learning for all. And as I said, we considered putting it in the other one as well, but didn't want to try to confuse the options too much. But I think that's something that if we're talking about option two, maybe we include as a part of that week as well, 4 days on, 1 day off, not off, remote learning for all, because we know this is going to increase the workload for our teachers, and it's a big concern for them as they're thinking about how they're going to support all their kids' needs.
Right, it's a tremendous concern for me. So that, thank you, Ms. Cruz. I may have answered my own question.
That's okay. It's important that you think aloud, and it comes out, and we figure it all out together.
Well, yeah, that's something that really is concerning me.
Mm-hmm.
Dr.
Mr.
Mark,
Chairman.
I've got, oh yes, Mr. Udy, go ahead.
I was wondering if it's possible that one teacher from each grade level would teach the remote and the other teachers. Now, this would be K through 8. I'm not sure how the high school would work. And then the others in that grade level would be teaching those in class. And that way, you only have one teacher that's doing remote for all of the kids, if that's possible.
Mr. Udy, we're looking, exploring that method as well. And all of these teaching methods would require some additional professional learning for our teachers to make sure that they are able and caught up to speed on what it is that they need to do. And those remote learning days, some of those days when the students are not there and the teachers have given them work in a flipped classroom format, that would give them the opportunity at that time to also work on lesson planning, to get back. Our teachers are familiar with individualizing instruction. But this is just going to take it a step further, where they are going to just have to extend their individualized instruction in a remote setting on alternating days. And a lot of that can be done through the flipped classroom approach. And our teachers this spring, they did an excellent job with that, because they taught multiple classes during the day. Students were in class anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on the grade level of the student. And they saw students each day of the week. And then on Friday or Wednesday, depending on the school schedules, the students were able to see all of their special teachers. So the schedules, our teachers have been able to adapt to this new style of learning, even though we know that in the spring we were in an emergency situation. But if you recall earlier, I believe it was in the May meeting where we showed how much our professional development had increased with our teachers and teaching in a virtual environment. So I think that's going to be key, that our teachers would need to continue to be supported in that way to ensure that they are not only able to individualize instruction, but flip classrooms and also share teaching amongst each other.
Yes, but I just thought that would be one way of relieving some of the workload on a teacher trying to do both, is if that option was being looked at.
Yes, sir. It absolutely is.
May I add one thing, Mr. Chair, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to remind everyone that with the options based on what our parents choose, we were not proposing a separate virtual school or a virtual academy somewhere strange. We were offering that we felt, due to the social emotional component, we thought we could do a better job at this go around, that we wanted to offer face-to-face and online in each school. We wanted students to belong to a student body, to belong to their school, and at each school, the family have the option of face-to-face or virtual online at each school. So I wanted to throw that out and just remind everyone that that option is by school. And that might also help with remote learning. There are some teachers that actually preferred, after trying it, they were thrust into it, but after trying it, they actually really liked that manner of delivering instruction. There are some families who are saying to us, based on the survey, that's what they want. The other thing I'd like to add is this, and then this will be the last thing I say. We also do not want this, after talking with several districts and after understanding how swiftly things change, we realize this probably needs, and this is a recommendation, board members, this is nothing definitive. We want you to sort of think about this. This probably needs to be a plan through first semester. This probably does not need to be a year-long plan at this point. That's probably worth just thinking through. And we say that because what if things change and we're able to do something different after first semester? But what if things don't change? Or if things change in another direction and we need to do a little something different? We want to be able to revisit this about October and possibly have another conversation very similarly to this. What we need to do right now is to get school open. The final thing, I know I said this a moment ago, but what we were all reminded as superintendents is, we know a decision will be made July 1st, but we were not guaranteed that that would be the last decision. There could be, if something else changes, we could have another decision later in the summer. And we may all have to come back to the table and do something different. And that's where that let's be flexible conversation sort of comes. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. Let's go with what we know. Let's do our best thinking. Let's take the best information we have right now, knowing this very well even might change later in the summer. And if it does, you know you will be the first to know.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Myrick, I've got two questions real quick. I want to think that towards the end of the year, and I don't know if it was an academic team meeting or maybe a board meeting, that we were actually able to see kind of what the school schedules look like and being able to see that learning going on and how they scheduled that. So what I'm confused a little bit about is that Mr. Peace is here, or Mr. Rivers is here, and that kids may have only got 1 hour of instruction, but then on the flip side, we're hearing teachers were overworked because of all they were doing. How do we reconcile those two conversations?
Well, each school did submit a schedule based on their grade span, and the schedule was based on students seeing their teachers each day.
Okay.
And I can share that schedule with you if you would like to kind of take a look at it. And we based it on elementary, limiting the amount of virtual time they have, using the research that we received from the Friday Institute and best practices. And then of course it was increased for middle school and high school. And each day, students were also asked to read 20 minutes a day as part of their planning. So teachers had that built in as well. And to that, and it went along with continuing our effort to push literacy throughout the district.
Okay.
But students did see multiple teachers, or not multiple teachers. If they were in high school, they would see multiple teachers. In middle school, they would see multiple teachers. And in elementary school, they were covering their math and their science and their social studies and their reading, and they're their core content areas.
Okay. And my other question is, last week I had the opportunity to participate in the North Carolina School Boards Association Summer Policy Conference. And one of the things they talked about at reentry, some districts were going at it with a thought of elementary does one thing, middle school does one thing, high school does one thing. Can you tell us a little bit about why we felt like that wouldn't be a good plan for Granville? I've heard it. I just would like for the rest of the board to kind of hear a little bit more.
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Yes, sir.
We looked at, we did consider all of those options, but we felt that those options were not the best options for for Granville County schools. For one, we thought about our parents and how this would affect our parents and how our students and families would fit into that space. Because one of the most important things that we were thinking, along with, because I believe what you're talking about is like secondary, middle school, and high school, especially going fully online, and then elementary school students will come face to face. Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so we just felt like that wasn't the best option for the district. Dr. McLean, do you have anything else you want to share with that? I know we have talked in depth about that and the reasons behind it.
Well, there again, several concerns. One was for our families with multiple children in multiple grade spans. Also, we're not certain. Well, it's more than just not certain. The concern around the lack of internet capacity in our community is a real issue, the equity around that. I think if we felt more strongly that the capacity was there, it would be something we could probably do. But right now, we know that was an issue this last go around. So we're having to rely heavily on the paper and pencil piece as part of our remote plan. So putting any group saying that they were going to go remote would be a huge concern for me, and I believe I speak for others. So we just want to be fair, we want to be equitable, and we want to put a lot of consideration. For our teachers, having one group to come and the others not, we believe would be an internal conversation we'd want to have. We're not sure we want to go that route yet. So many reasons for us to try to find a way to serve everyone about the same, if at all possible.
And Dr. McLean, also, one of the considerations, and we have found this just through our Granville Online that we have been doing for several years, all students don't learn in a virtual environment. Some of our students, regardless of their academic level, if they're AIG, or if there's some of our struggling students, they still need that face-to-face instruction with the teacher. So allowing the students to come in to the school gives them an opportunity to have some face time with that teacher to maybe answer those questions and maybe help them to stay on track with the work that they are supposed to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Board members, any other final questions you want the staff to kind of wrap around before we move on?
I have a question for Ms. Curtis.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Curtis, can you tell me again how many parent surveys were returned?
In this last round, we had more than 3,000 overall. Since we did a version of the survey twice, we had more than 5,000 responses to the question about virtual, blended, or face-to-face, because that was the one thing that was consistent across the two surveys. But on the last survey, it was a little more than 3,000, and that number is growing, I am sure, as the meeting has gone on today. So, and we asked people to complete it for each student that they have. So if you had 2 students, we said, please complete it for each student that you have. So they may have completed it twice because we wanted to know about at specific schools what the need might be.
And can you tell me the methods they had to return those surveys?
Yes, ma'am. So we did both an online and a phone survey. So people could either respond to an online form or listen to the questions over the phone and enter their answers on their keypad.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have a question, I guess, more directed towards Dr. Winborn or Mr. Perry, because a lot of this hinges upon, I guess, teachers being comfortable being back in the building or in the classroom. Do we have any idea yet or what our numbers are looking like around that? Like how many actually are comfortable coming back into the classroom?
Yeah, I'll start off, and Mr. Perry, please fill in any gaps. Our own internal teacher survey showed that 55%, I believe, of the teachers who responded would be interested in teaching face-to-face. The other remaining teachers were split, I think 25% virtual and about maybe 20% Granville Academy type format. Now our survey did not ask about the reason for that or if they were at risk or anything of that nature, but it was sort of an indication that, at first glance, closing in on a half, did not want to be teaching full-time face-to-face. We've seen similar survey results shown. I've read some national articles and seen some surveys from Wake and Durham about this, and it looks like that's trending in sort of the same fashion. Easily, I think we could expect a quarter or a third of our employees who are going to be at risk or who have a family member who's at risk. We've also uncovered this problem with our teachers who have children of their own, and maybe they don't live in Granville County. Say our teachers that live in Wake County that have school-age children, they're going to be on a different schedule than we are, possibly. And what are our teachers going to do about childcare for their own children? And so that's going to present problems as well. So if another district's on A week B week and we're on A day B day, that's going to create some challenges. So I think you've identified, Dr. McKnight, a critical point in being able to execute any of these plans. It's just making sure we have enough employees in place. And it's not just our teachers. We might have principals who, because of a medical condition, aren't able to return to the building, or assistant principal. This doesn't know, it's not restricted to people's titles. So we're concerned about that as well.
May I add something, Mr. Chairman? I just wanted to point out that I think Dr. Winborn's exactly right, and he sort of addressed this as well, but just because there are a high percentage of employees in any district that are either high risk or have family members that are high risk, that doesn't mean that all of them have to, are automatically entitled to work remotely. So we know that there's a large percentage who would prefer that. But I think what we don't know yet is if that's not an option, if we are face-to-face and teachers have to teach face-to-face, what percentage will, I guess, choose to resign or to do something else or to take leave. And it won't be zero. I mean, certainly there will be some.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right. Does everybody have at least what questions we think we can answer tonight answered? All right, so board, what will come from this is staff will go back and they've taken your concerns down now and they will work through those. July 1st, we will hear from the governor of what his decision is on that day. And then if you remember correctly, we are scheduled for a called board meeting on July 2nd at 9 a.m. And that is where we will receive that information from staff. If you have any further questions, and then we will vote on what it looks like to return August 17th, at least for that time frame. I think Dr. McLean made a great point that obviously that can always change, and that is why you have been asked to place a hold on your calendar for July 13th, just in case there are any changes. We have a date already there in place. And then, of course, we have our August 3rd board meeting. So all of this is quickly moving. So staff, thank you so much for your work on that. Board, thank you for your deliberation and the questions. Definitely good questions. And I am certain members of the public will probably be reaching out to you in the days to come as we have quite the viewership today of seeing what we're doing here today. So thank you for that. So now we will move on to our finance section. Couple things to do there with us making some changes to our budget, but the first up is 4.01. We have Miss Day and Miss Lofton, who will be presenting another computer purchase for the 2021 school year. So I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson and board members. Before we dive into this particular purchase request, I just want to walk you down memory lane of recent technology purchases you've approved and how this fits in. Back in May, you approved the purchase of Chromebooks for 3rd grade, including carts from the state COVID funds we received. Unfortunately, we received notification about a week ago that those computers would not arrive by June 30th. We've talked about, everybody in the state is ordering devices and getting in line for those. And so this was an order that we made early May, but it is not going to arrive by June 30th. So because, as we talked about earlier, the state COVID funds expire June 30th, we're able to shift this purchase to Title I funds, which do carry over, and use the state COVID funds for devices that had originally been purchased from Title I funds. So these orders provided Chromebooks for 3rd grade, including charging carts. But I wanted to update you about that. Also, earlier in June, you approved the purchase of replacement Chromebooks in our normal refresh cycle for 6th and 9th graders and new enrollments at Granville Academy to maintain our existing one-to-one take-home device program at all secondary schools in Granville Academy. Tonight, we are bringing you a request for a purchase of touchscreen Chromebooks for K2 devices from the Coronavirus Relief Funds, the House Bill 1043. We received $133,000 in these funds, which will purchase 339 of the 1,397 devices needed for K2 in preparation of remote learning. We will be bringing you an additional request from the federal CARES funds soon. Included in board docs, you have the memo that kind of walks through this purchase. It is a purchase of greater than $100,000, so that is why we're bringing it to you, to the board. Also included in board docs is the purchase requisition and the quote, and then as well as this falls under the TIPS cooperative purchasing program that meets the purchasing guidelines. So you have information regarding that as well. But Ms. Lofton, and as well as you have information about the K2 devices, how many we need total and how many this purchase will provide for us. So Ms. Lofton and I are both available to answer any questions that you have about this particular purchase.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions? Okay, all right, seeing none, then this is an item of action. It is being recommended that we approve the contract that has just been presented to you for the purchase of this technology. And so what would be the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
All right. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Peace and a second by Dr. Houlihan to approve the contract as presented. Is there any further discussion? All right, if you're ready to vote, then we'll go around the table for a roll call vote. Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Day and if you will speak to 4.02, the sole source approval.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Richardson. Board members, this is an approval request that we have brought to you annually for many years for the purchase of Apple laptops for our standardized teacher devices. Board Policy 6430 allows for a sole source exception to the bidding process for several specific reasons. Our main reason for requesting the sole source exception is for the standardization and compatibility of our teacher laptops. This is the most cost-effective and efficient way for our technology department to support these devices. Ms. Lofton and I will be glad to take questions.
Board members, do you have questions? Ms. Day, this is something that comes to us once a year, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
All right.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Rivers.
And just this is just out of curiosity. I use personally a MacBook and a PC for my work, and the PCs are substantially less expensive. Of course, they do have more issues generally. Are we confident that we're getting the best financial return by using Apple products, which I personally like, but recognizing they are sometimes 3 and 4 times more expensive than equivalently powerful PCs?
Sure, I'll go ahead and take that question. So I would say, I know a similar question came up last year, and we were able to compare similar specs on the Apple products we get with the PC version, and they were very similar. I will say that the Apple price continues to drop from year to year, and we're finally below 1,000. So the price is dropping from year to year. And I would say when you look at the specs of what we're purchasing compared to something comparable, it's eye to eye. And like you said, I mean, even you prefer it. It's a great device that we've had for years. Our teachers are used to it. And a lot of the technology that we use is assuming we're going to have a Mac, all the adapters that we have, the dongles, those kinds of things.
Okay, so bottom line is it's a wash financially.
I would say so.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, board? All right, again, this is brought to you as an action item tonight. The recommended action is that you approve the sole source approval as an annual request. What is the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion. This is Danny Guty to approve it.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the sole source approval per our board policy 6430. Motion made by Mr. Udy and second by Mr. Peace. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we're back to more computer purchases. Ms. Day, Ms. Lofton?
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. So now, board members, this request is for the purchase of teacher MacBooks based on our refresh cycle for teacher devices. So walking through the memo that's included on board docs, these devices are being purchased from the coronavirus relief funds of $23,000 and existing technology funds. The total cost is $167,213.20 for 60 13-inch MacBook Air laptops, and will refresh Butner STEM Elementary, Mount Energy Elementary, Far River Elementary, GC Holly Middle, and will complete Northern Granville Middle after the merge with Mary Potter last year. Included in board docs is the purchase requisition and quote, as well as the refresh plan for these schools. And again, Ms. Lofton and I will be glad to take any questions.
Ms. Lofton, what happens to the laptops that we're actually replacing?
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. Give me just a second to pull up a spreadsheet my techs worked on where I can show you the devices that we refreshed this past year were IN 16s, which means they were purchased in 2016. Let me pull that up really quick and I'll be able to show you which ones are still usable and what we've done with the ones that are in still good enough condition to repurpose. So I'll pull that up in just a second.
Okay.
In the meantime, I have another question, or you want to just wait till after you get this pulled up?
You can go ahead and ask, Mr. Rivers.
Okay, thank you. if I understood Ms. Day correctly, she said we're buying 60 computers or refreshing 60 computers, and it's costing $120,000 roughly. Ms. Lofton has said that we're down to $1,000 a computer. So I'm just wondering why we're at $2,000 a computer for these.
I think it was 160.
160.
Yeah, it should have said, yeah, 160 is in the memo.
Okay, so
160.
160 computers for $160,000?
Correct.
Thank you.
Miss Lofton, you're muted.
Thank you. Happens to all of us, right? Okay, so these are the 2016 MacBooks that we refreshed this 2019-2020 school year. And I can share this with you if you'd like to see. A lot of times what we do, for example, is we'll repurpose it for a TA or someone like that. You can see per school. So this is Butner STEM Middle, Granville Central. Now this tab is specifically the usable devices. And then you'll be able to see like unusable devices per school. We'll have some of them that something is preventing us from being able to use it for whatever reason. Like this one has liquid damage, the keyboard's not working, a cracked screen. So it looks like some of those there. So we do keep up with the devices that we collect, those that are still in enough working condition that somebody else could use it, but maybe not a full-time teacher who's using it all day, every day. So you'll see most of them are going to TAs or going to replace broken devices, things like that. So I don't know if this answers your question or not, but we do keep close tabs on that.
It does. Thank you. All right, board members, any other questions? All right, again, this is brought to you as an action item tonight. The recommended action is to approve the contract as presented for the 160 laptops for the refresh. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Houlihan. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Udy.
Right, so we have a motion to approve the contract as presented, a motion by Dr. Houlihan and a second by Mr. Udy. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, so that motion passes unanimously. We appreciate it, Ms. Lofton, Ms. Day, for that. Thank you so much. All right, so now we will move to 4.04, our budget amendments. If you remember correctly, oh, no, this is the wrong thing. Ms. Day, you want to speak to our budget amendments?
That's right.
Yes, Mr. Richardson. I think Gwen is going to pull it up. Yeah.
We need to go back to tonight's agenda, please.
This is the right thing, right? Budget amendments.
Yeah, we're seeing your spreadsheet still.
Oh. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Let me just stop sharing.
There we go.
And share again.
Ms. Lofton is driving for me tonight.
Okay.
That.
Sorry, I was seeing it on my screen. Okay, so here you go. And do you want me to open this?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So first off, board members, I just want to thank you for having this board meeting so late in the month of June so that we're able to do these year-end budget amendments and bring those to you. I really appreciate the timing of this meeting and your willingness to have this meeting. So I very much appreciate that. I'm very pleased to be able to present to you these budget amendments tonight. It means that June 30th is right around the corner and this closeout process will soon be over. And maybe I can get some sleep. Seriously though, before I begin, I would just like to publicly thank the entire finance department for working so hard to make this happen. June is a very difficult month for finance, and each and every member has stepped up to make that happen. The payroll staff spent several late nights and days off at the office to get the payroll out for the month. Our assistant finance officer, Lisa Evans, has worked extremely hard and spent many nights and Saturdays at the office to make a successful closeout possible. All of the finance department has really gone above and beyond to close the fiscal year, and I sincerely appreciate all of their hard work and dedication. So before we go through the specific budget amendments for tonight, I wanted to give you a little background on the closeout process. When I say that, what does that mean? After these budget amendments, our total budget for 1920 is $96.5 million. Of course, that includes all of our funds, state, local, federal, grants, child nutrition, capital outlay, and after-school program. Our main focus of the closeout relates to funds expiring on tomorrow, June 30th, which is mostly state funds and then the resulting effect on local. The total of our state and local funds is $69 million, with $52 million of that being state, with that, the majority of that expiring tomorrow at midnight. The goal with the closeout is to maximize our use of the state funds allocated to us for the fiscal year. In most financial operations, a closeout is completed a certain amount of time after the end of the fiscal year. For our state funds, our deadline is tomorrow, June 30th, with little or no time for any correction. That is the reason for the late nights and weekend work to get it all done prior to June 30th. So as we go through the budget amendments, I will give you more detail about the way we are closing the fiscal year for each fund. The first budget amendment is for the state fund. This budget amendment is closing out the fiscal year based on the remaining funds. The budget amendment reflects a change to the total budget. The largest portion is budgeting the coronavirus relief funds received for child nutrition, $354,000. I wanted to point out a couple of things. When you look at the first line under the expenditures, the regular instructional services, you see a large increase in that line. Please remember that state funds can mostly be used for instructional purposes, with each pot of money having specific guidelines. We are ending the year with 36 different pots of money in the state fund, with our total state budget again of $52 million. Also, I will make note of the $45,000 at the bottom, the last, the decrease for interfund transfers at the bottom of the expenditure. That is, each year the state requires a $45,000 state match for the child nutrition program. We were told that the use of state COVID supplemental funds for the meal program would qualify for the match, so we undid the match with other state funds. Well, based on the guidance that we received last Wednesday, we cannot use those state funds for child nutrition based on the way that we ended the year with child nutrition. So the state expenditures we spent for the meal program related to the bus driver payments, and we've requested clarification from the state about this, waiting an answer of whether that can be used for the match. So I tell you all of this because based on that answer, we will have an additional budget amendment. And per the resolution that the board approved at the June meeting, I will bring a copy of that to you at your next meeting, and we'll give it to Dr. McLean for her consideration. But as I will any additional budget amendments changes that happen from tonight through tomorrow. So the next budget amendment for tonight is for the local fund. So that's the next page. It is not a change to the total budget, but within the existing budget. As we saw in the state budget amendment, there was an increase in regular instructional funds. The local budget reflects a decrease as some of those expenditures are shifted to maximize the use of the state funds. The other large increase on the local budget amendment is to budget for internet service from remaining local funds and save E-rate funds, which carry over that we can use next year to help support remote learning. The question in your mind may be, how are we going to end up with local fund balance for the year? What is the projection at this point? I can definitively say that we did not have to rely on fund balance this year to balance our budget. Again, we did not have to rely on fund balance to balance our budget. This, of course, is an unprecedented year in many ways, and that is no different financially. With shutting our doors in March, there are some costs that we simply did not have or were lower based on the governor's directive. Our transportation costs, substitutes, plant operations, including utilities, were much lower than anticipated for a full year of operation. Based on what happens for next year, these were one-time cost reductions. So I'd like to remind you that there are still adjustments to be made, and some adjustments can make big swings. Based on the cost reductions due to COVID-19, we are projecting an actual increase in local fund balance of $1 million, which is 1.4% of our total state and local funding. Again, that's 1.4% of our state and local funding, our basic operating funds. Based on what we are bracing for next year, it's great news that we have these funds to carry over to help us for next year. So I'll pause there if you have any questions, or that was a lot of information just on the local fund, or any comments on that.
Board members, any comments on the local fund?
Ms. Day, I have one. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Beth, could you go back and say what you said about not using local funds this year? And more than anything, well, just could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So again, when we're doing our closeout process, we are maximizing the state money and trying to preserve local dollar, making sure that Granville County is getting the most of every dollar that has been allocated to us for state. And in that process, when we look at our costs for this year, our transportation costs, our substitutes, plant operations, including utilities, were much lower than anticipated because due to this unprecedented year and closing our doors in March, there were costs that we just simply did not have this year that we have in a normal year. And so based on that, the projection that I'm looking at right now is that we will actually increase our fund balance in this year.
What does that mean?
That we did not use fund balance and more will go into fund balance.
I follow you. Okay. And how much will that be? Again?
So I'm projecting, again, adjustments still to be made, but right at 1 million, which is 1.4% of our budget.
So is that
local budget, local and state budget.
What you're saying is that we'll be putting in at the end of the year, we'll be putting it back into fund balance $1 million?
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Day?
Yes, sir.
So the question that popped immediately in my mind, if we've got $1 million we weren't planning on, and obviously we want to make sure we got money to fund whatever contingencies happen next year that we can't anticipate. But is it conceivable that we could hire a couple of school social workers for next year with some of that money? The reason I mentioned that is one of the other studies that came out last week was that they're estimating 20 to 30% of all school children now are going through bouts of depression due to the lockdown and isolation from their friends. I think we're going to have, and Dr. Myrick alluded to it earlier, we're going to have some socio-emotional issues. So is that something that the staff wants to think about? And this would be for Dr. McLean as well. Do we want to maybe pinch off $150,000 and hire a couple of social workers?
Mr. Rivers, I don't want to cut you off, but this is a topic that comes in the next section about the budget update. If you remember the last meeting, we had instructed the staff to bring information back regarding that.
Okay, great. I'll wait. Thank you.
All right, do you want to keep going, Ms. Day?
Yes, Ms. Richardson. The next budget amendment is for the federal grants funds. And the largest portion of this budget amendment is budgeting for the CARES Act funding of $1.4 million. In addition, it is budgeting for a new school nutrition equipment grant for serving lines for Webb of $78,000 and the other adjustments adjust revenues within existing federal programs. As a reminder, federal budget amendments must be submitted to the state for approval. There are a few federal budget amendments pending with the state, which, if approved at the state, can be brought to you as information after Dr. McLean's consideration of approval. The next budget amendment is for the capital outlay fund. The next page. It is doing a couple of things. One thing is budgeting for payments to be made by TPI on the installment bus agreements. That's the $301,301. It's also adjusting the budget in the county additional capital outlay fund, sometimes is referred to as the $15 million. As approved by the county commissioners, it is adjusting for $400,000 from roofing into HVAC. The next budget amendment is for the other restricted fund budget, which is budgeting for additional Medicaid funds received of $86,000 and recycling revenue, as well as adjusting within the budget for the year. It is an increase to the other restricted budget of $88,000 total. The last budget amendment that you have tonight is the Child Nutrition Fund, and this budget amendment is doing several things. It's budgeting for the net additional federal funds we anticipate for the meal site program, net of the reduction in the regular USDA federal revenue. It is also reducing the local funds for the reduction in the lunch payments due to COVID-19 school closure. And the good news is it is eliminating the indirect cost not paid. It's a sort of an accounting transaction that we're required to post if Child Nutrition is not able to pay the indirect cost applicable to them, then we budget for a revenue called indirect cost not paid. So based on the preliminary results of operations for Child Nutrition, it appears they will be very close to breaking even, including the payment of indirect costs of around $300,000. Again, there are many adjustments outstanding. However, this is very good news. And if approved tonight, Child Nutrition can pay indirect costs through May, and then we'll wait for the final adjustments for the payment of the June indirect costs. Again, it's been many years since Child Nutrition has been able to pay the indirect cost in full. And it's based on the number of meals that have been served and the reimbursement rates associated with those number of meals. So I'll be glad to take any further questions.
All right, board members, do you have further questions? All right, Ms. Day, thank you so much. Please let your team know how much we appreciate. We know all the work that is, well, we probably don't even have a clue of all the work that has to go into this point. So board, this does come to you as an action item. The budget amendments are brought to you for your consideration. And so what would be the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. McKnight and a second by Mr. Peace to approve the budget amendments as presented. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, if you're ready to vote, Ms. Allward?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Day, it looks like those budget amendments have passed unanimously. All right, now we will move to 4.05. This is our budget update. If you remember correctly, Ms. Day and Dr. McLean brought us information on our local fund budget along with the other funds last meeting, and you instructed them to bring back some additional information. And so I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Day, at this time, will you share the report for this evening?
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Board members, you asked that we bring to you specific options for the 2021 budget based on the discussion at the last meeting. To help put this discussion in perspective, I wanted to start with the second slide with a review of information we discussed during the budget proposal. So this is a document that was pulled directly from the budget proposal document. And I think it's a good way to sort of look at a summary of where we were with the 2021 budget, the challenges and the overall picture as we kind of walk down memory lane of what we've discussed during the spring during the budget process. So this document lays out each of the challenges, and it lays out whether our budget has been reduced for that challenge or whether we requested additional funding for that particular challenge. So the first one is a reduction in state funding based on DPI's projected enrollment. That is what we know that based on our enrollment this year, that DPI is projecting our enrollment to decrease, and that is equivalent to $389,000. And that has been reduced from our budget. It was reduced in our budget proposal. And we did not ask for additional county funding for that. The second line is a reduction in state and local funds due to projected enrollment. That was what we were projecting for our reduced enrollment for next year. And based on that, it's 1.8 million in of a budget reduction between state and local funds. And again, in our budget proposal document, we did not ask the county for additional funding for that. We reflected a reduction in our budget for that, to account for that. The third line is the increased continued personnel costs. And so that is the salary and benefit increases. And we've recently got information from the state about certified employees receiving a step increase, which is equivalent to what we pretty much to what we calculated in our budget proposal as far as a percentage of an increase. Even a step in, even though there's not a state raise per se, but a step increase is an increase in salaries and an increase in costs for us. And also the increase in the retirement rate, which is actually higher than what we had projected with our budget proposal, about 0.2% higher than what had been projected. The actual rate is 0.2% higher. So those increased continued personnel costs is in the middle column of this document, which means we did request additional county funding to account for that. So our cost was $632,000, and then when you walk down the document at the bottom, the portion to flow through to the charter schools is $178,000. So our the total amount that we requested from the county was $810,000. Then I added the little section on the right of the document to just show you how much the county funded in their budget. So of our cost of $632,000, the county funded the $254,000, and then I'm sorry, let me say that again. The county funded $326,000, and of that, the portion that would flow through to the charter schools is $72,000. So what would cover our cost is $254,000. I thought it would be helpful to show that side by side with this document. So if you will, I would like to jump for a second to talk a little bit more about that $632,000, our costs in personnel. So if we can go to the last slide, it says continuation costs versus funding. This is a document we looked at last time, but I just wanted to review that again and make sure that everybody understood where that $632,000 comes from of continuation costs. So it's made up of a couple of things. It's based on what we're projecting for the salary increase. It's based on the projection for the benefit increases. And then it's also based on the classified salary step increase. We have a local scale. And so again, as an employee goes up a step, although it's not, employees don't consider it necessarily a raise, it's just a step increase, but it's an additional cost for us to pay that step increase. So that classified salary step is not, we don't get additional funding from the state for that. So our total cost with state and locally paid employees is $71,000. And just to talk a little bit about that state unfunded dollar allotments, sometimes that doesn't is not, it's hard to understand. So the state, for the funds that we receive dollar allotments, and for example, that includes low wealth. So we get low wealth money from the state. Well, that is based on a formula based on how the county funds us, that we get those state dollars, and it's based on our property value in the county and the county's ability to pay us, and that kind of thing. It does not include take into account a salary increase or a retirement rate increase. We don't get our dollars based on that. So when those costs go up for us, that's less than we can do with those state dollars unless we get additional dollars to cover those costs. So that is what the 132,220 in the first column and the 214,000 for benefits is made up of. Those state funds that we don't get additional state money when salaries go up or when benefits go up. Those are those costs. Then the second column is the local budget. So that's the 96,000 is the projection for the salary increase, and 118,000 is the projected for the benefit increase. So of that, about 65% of those local dollars is related to the local supplement and local benefits. So not only our end of the year, our teacher supplement, but also our like coaching supplements, and that's not affected by a step increase, our coaching supplements, but it is affected by when the retirement rate goes up and we have existing staff members that coach for us, then the cost of the retirement goes up for us. So I just wanted to point out that percentage, and it's about 76,000 of those dollars are associated with actual local positions. We currently have full-time local positions. We have 18.6 full-time local positions. 12 of those are maintenance positions or within the plant operations department, and 5.69 is the central office. We use other funding sources as much as possible to pay for those kind of positions, and are split sometimes. And then we have one school-based position out of local dollars. But so that total cost is $632,000 for us. And then we were funded from the county $254,395, the portion of the county funding that would remain with Granville County Schools. And so the difference or the shortfall is the $378,000 that will be part of our discussions tonight. I just wanted to give a really good explanation of that those continuation costs. So Gwen, if you'll go back to the third slide, I think. Keep going. One more, this one. Board members, this is another document that was included in the budget proposal, and this breaks down the reductions in the budget because of ADM. And so this total document is the 2.2 million, and that is based on the state funds that we're projecting that we will not have based on a reduction in ADM, and then the local funds that based on students attending an increase in students attending charter schools, these would be additional funds that would need to would be required to be passed through to the charter school. So you can see a total of 1.8 million in state and 450,000 in local. And so this is a very difficult document with these number of positions reductions in our budget. And I know that HR has been working on this, and it is difficult. And we're trying to do they're trying to do all that they can through attrition and that type of thing. I know, Dr. McLean, if you want to say anything on this.
Absolutely. This is a tough one. It's tough because if you have a facility open, you want to make certain the facility is covered properly, and cuts like this make that very difficult. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, Ms. Day.
Okay, so board members, the kind of putting it all that in perspective and where we're at with the total budget. The next slide is the options. These are the options as I understood you requested from us to present tonight. So this document was done a couple of weeks ago. I mean, or a week ago. I'm in a time warp. My days are have gone together, but you know, before we're at the point where we're at tonight as far as closeout. But so it includes 4 options. The first option, and this is how fund balance, what kind of fund balance we would use based on each of those options. So the first option is funding just the continuation costs with fund balance, the $378,000 that we looked at. So we are currently appropriating $257,000 to balance our budget. That's what we had appropriated. Again, we talked about how we didn't end the fiscal year by using those funds, but we were in a very unique year this year. So the fund balance, to balance the budget, it requires the $257,516. Then the continuation funding, $378,000, that would be a use of $635,000 of fund balance. Option 2 is funding the continuation, and also funding the supplement from the appropriated fund balance. So that one-time $250 supplement cost. So that total is $886,154 of fund balance appropriated use. Option 3 is funding the continuation and then the positions that were requested from the county, the expansion items that we had requested funding for. That cost is $248,000. So then that use of fund balance would be $884,416. Option 4 is funding all requested items from fund balance appropriated, which would be $1.1 million. I will say that one of the things, and I didn't mention this before, but one of the things that a challenge that was not included on that first slide we looked at is additional reduction in state funding. And one of the things we're hearing is that the state is in a very difficult situation with revenues. And we don't know what to anticipate next year as far as additional state reductions. I have heard the words discretionary reduction, which we've had in the past, where the state says, we're not going to tell you where to cut it, but we're just going to tell you how much you got to cut. And you've got to cut that. So it could be that if our enrollment is decreases as we projected, that we would have those cuts in addition to these additional state cuts. So I just want to put that out there as well. And that is concerning.
We heard that last week. We also want to remind you, board members, that I shared before, we wrote a grant and we were able to secure 1 social worker and 1 instructional specialist. So I wanted to remind you of that as well.
So the next document just follows through on those 4 options on the next slide and reflects what our fund balance would look like. And again, this was prepared earlier in our closeout process. And at that point, I knew we would not use fund balance in 1920, but not to what extent we might increase fund balance. So that part is not included on this slide, but you can see where we were at on each. As of 6/30/19 from our audit, we were at $6.2 million in total local fund balance. I've reflected on this slide, no use in fund balance. The projected fund balance on each of those options, use of fund balance for option 1 through 4, and then the projected fund balance for what the projected fund balance would be for June 30th, 2021, and then the percentage as a percentage of our total governmental expenditures. So I will tell you that adding approximately $1 million to that fund balance, our percentages are, the first one is 8.07, and then 7.77 for option 2 and 3, and 7.46 for option 4. At the bottom, you can see for reference, as of June 30th, 19, our audit, we had 7.26 was the percentage of fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, just so you would have a comparison. So, Mr. Richardson, that was the remaining slides are slides we just as reference that we went through at the last board meeting. But that kind of concludes what I had planned to present tonight to give you the information. So I'll be glad to take questions.
Okay, can you go back to the slide that presents the 4 options, please? There you go. All right, board members, what questions do you have, and kind of my thought and how we need to frame this conversation? Obviously, and I feel like we've got to do the fund balance or the continuation funding. So basically, we need to kind of wrap our conversation around the supplement and the extra positions, or if we're going to combine both of them. And am I kind of correct in that thinking, Ms. Day?
Yes, Mr. Richardson.
Okay. All right. So board members, so those are kind of the options in front of us. That we just do the continuation funding, or we do some sort of combination of the supplement and the positions. So board members, what kind of thoughts do you have about this?
Yeah, Tom Houlihan. The big thing is, in my mind, is recurring costs. And I know, for example, that since we did not get but part of the ongoing local current expense monies for salary increases and so on and so forth. Beth, talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about what happens if the 378 becomes an ongoing cost. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, that is a recurring cost. And that is, that's problematic for it to continue indefinitely to come out of fund balance, because it will continue to reduce our fund balance every year.
Yeah. And do you think that there's any chance that we'll recoup that from the commissioners?
Dr. McLean, do you want to take that one?
I don't know, Dr. Houlihan. What I'll tell you is the moment we got the newsletter this weekend, I not only forwarded it to you all, our board, but we did forward it to the county just so that they could see the rate, the retirement rate and such.
Yeah. See, that's the big thing. I'm all for, hiring folks and what you've got laid out here. The question is, what do we do after this year?
Right.
Which means that whoever we hired, we'd have to understand that it would be a 1-year contract and would be contingent on funding. I mean, I think all these look really, really good. I just wonder about hiring any more personnel in terms of the amount of money that we're accruing now in local funds for salary costs and fringe benefits. It's getting really it's really getting up there. And all I'm saying is I'm not opposed to any of this stuff if we can figure out how to do it so that it's not a recurring kind of thing, because if it is, we're back to getting in big trouble.
Miss Day, will you talk with us just a little bit about one-time money?
Yeah. So as Dr. Hoolan is exactly correct, you know, the fund balance is sort of like your savings account, and it once it's gone, it's gone. It doesn't have a regular funding source, you know, to increase it. So anything that comes out of there, you're trying to balance your expenses with your income so that your recurring expenses are coming out of your recurring income.
Right.
And
So
then how do you eventually get to the point that you don't do that anymore?
Right. Right. And Dr. Houlihan, you bring up a valid point that we don't want anyone to miss. This was a very unprecedented year. It was strange. The buildings were closed. So while I know some individuals will hear we're contributing $1 million, make no mistake, it was because the buildings were closed, so the utility bill wasn't as high. We did not run the buses between March and the end of the year like we normally would have, and things of that nature.
Sure.
You get where I'm going. So we were able, thanks, let me add this, because I talk with a lot of colleagues. Now there's some districts that are not in the position we're in tonight. Let me commend our finance department for reading every piece of legislation that comes out every day. And when I say it changed every day, it was near every day. But they read every bit of it, which means sometimes they would stay late at night. We'd talk at 9:30 at night, and my goodness, something would come out first thing the next morning, and they'd have to go in and undo it. But the willingness to undo it and redo it again based on what new had come down the pike is what saved some of this state money so that we could have local money and things of that nature. And not all districts are in the position we're in tonight. So I can't promise, though, that that's going to happen again next year.
Sure, then that's the issue. Of course not. So, do we have to make a decision on these options tonight?
Well, I think that was originally the plan, because by the end of business tomorrow, Ms. Day, walk us through that rule about June 30th.
Well, so I think that the main thing is about, our planning and being able to know whether we can, are we to hire these positions, or are we to, I think that making these decisions, these for 2021 budget decisions, I think that's the main thought about that. And to know, guidance about when we do get a budget from the state, or if we do, or if we get projections for, our continuation budget from the state, that we will know the direction to go in from the board on that, as far as how much the fund balance to use. The difficulty that I see in this year is the fact that, which, whether that'll be any unique or not, but the difficulty is that amount of cuts that we are looking at for our budget is very, very problematic. I mean, it's difficult and challenging, and might be impossible. Some of it might not be that we can do it and still maintain the buildings, as Dr. McLean said, and staff them adequately. And then so to add, making a reduction of 378,000 on top of that is just not, I really don't think that's feasible at all, to be able to do that in this year. So I think that some decisions have to be made to do, longer term decisions to make going forward. And this is a temporary solution to fund it out of fund balance.
I'll make it even more difficult, which please forgive me. I apologize for doing that. But one of the financial conversations Ms. Day and I were having earlier, and then I had to have with our HR department, was the difficulty we're having this year in the midst of a pandemic. We're talking a very similar conversation you all had earlier as a board with this intensive cleaning, and to what degree and what not, and so forth and so on. And it says I'm supposed to cut a custodian, I think a 1 point something. The question is that the year? Is this the year to do that? And where should that occur?
Good point.
You know, the realistic conversations around things like that. You know, we're taking additional temperatures before teachers come into the building, before students come into the building, and I'm supposed to cut an additional clerical. The question around, is this the year to do that? You know, just little things that seem small, but the reality around, until some larger decisions are made, do we need a temporary fix? And in that $1 million was saved, is this the year to make those decisions or to do something different? So the question then became for us, is this the year to talk about 2 instructional leads? We were able to get a social worker out of another pot. We didn't foresee it coming. We were hoping it would happen, but do we need to talk about saving some other more practical things? Just conversations like that.
Sure. Well, then my last comment, then because I don't want to hog the thing. What I would love to see about our fund balance is a 4-year plan as to how that money would be paid for over time. In other words, if whatever we go with, how will that be paid for over the next 4 years? Or do you drop something and so on and so forth? Because I think the fund balance is certainly big enough that we can make some moves on that, very definitely. But the question is, I'm driving you crazy with is, that's great this year. What do we do 4 years from now? Mm-hmm. And it would be great to be able to see exactly how this would play out for the next 4 years.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And I think Dr. Houlihan has really hit the nail on the head. We just are going to have to make some very hard decisions, and there's just no getting around it. Now, we're having the retreat in August, and one of the things we're supposed to talk about is, you know, some tough decisions about, you know, reducing our fixed costs. So that's on one hand to I think join with Dr. Houlihan. We have to have a plan going forward how we're going to pay our bills, and the only way we can do it is to cut our costs. We're not going to get any more money. I think we all are pretty well convinced of that, other than grants that we can't count on but are really blessings, you know, from heaven when we get them. The other thing that really concerns me is the emotional toll this lockdown has taken on our children and will take on them if we go to plan C next year or plan B. We already know that we needed social workers and that we had mental health issues that we really couldn't, it was difficult to handle with only 1.5 social workers. I think if there's an opportunity to add another social worker, even on top of the one that Dr. McLean was able to fortunately get with a grant, and recognizing it might be a 1-year contract, I think this year, if there was any year that we really are going to have to be concerned about the mental well-being of our students, is this year. So again, 2 points. We got to make some tough decisions very soon. And we got to think about what we're going to see when our students come back on the 17th.
All right, thank you, sir. Other comments?
Teacher. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Udy.
Looking at the lead teachers and social worker, I'm with Mr. Rivers. I think we're going to need those more than anything, because the lead teachers are the ones that help the teachers the most when they can't leave the classroom, and they also fill in as substitutes. I think those two right there are going to be needed more than anything else.
Okay. Other comments?
Yes, sir.
I've got
This is
one.
Mr. Peace.
All right, Mr. Peace.
Yeah, my one of the concerns I have has to do with during the upcoming year, we are going to be doing a lot more as relates to keeping the buildings clean and all the additional stuff that we might have to do. And we really don't know what that's going to be yet. So, you know, my concern is it'll probably cost us more to operate if the state don't step up to the plate and give us funding to do what they are going to ask us to do. So we might ought to take that into consideration before we start spending money.
Yes, sir. Miss Allred.
I was just going to say that I would have a really hard time sleeping at night knowing that we eliminated positions and then added some new ones. I understand that the need for social workers and lead instructors is great, and I understand that. But being that we're cutting positions and then going to add some more just does not sit right with me. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way if I'm by myself, but to me, that just is not the right thing to do.
Yes, ma'am. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to agree with Ms. Allred on that one, and Mr. Peace. It's just too much of an unknown right now, and having to have PPEs and, you know, preparing. We don't know what the state's going to do and step up. And I'd hate to spend that money to bring somebody in, and then this time next year we're sitting here trying to figure out how do we pay the social worker to keep them on for another year, or these instructional teachers.
Yes, sir.
Greg, I would respectfully disagree with you from the standpoint that, and Ms. Allred as well, if I understood, you know, every year there are new issues that crop up that we don't address or try to, then the issues get worse. The thing that Mr. Rivers brought up about the social workers and so forth, you know, are they more important, even though they're new, are they more important to what we're facing right now in 2020 in our schools, so that it would logically, we should fund them. And I just don't think that we can avoid the importance of some of these things that are not in the budget now that should be, i.e. the social workers and so forth. So there's a little bit of respectful non-agreement, and we're obviously allowed, you know, think the way we want to, but I just think that we've got to be, if there are things that have cropped up that are difficult, I think we need to look at them and see if we can fund them.
If this
So
was
everyone, yes.
I was just wondering, like, if we ended this on like a normal type of year, the schools are open, buses are running, we wouldn't have any type of fund balance to even consider this, would we?
Well, fortunately for our district, but because of, I'm gonna be very honest, just because of a good finance department, we're a very fortunate district. We have a fund balance. It's a matter of whether we choose to use it or not in this manner.
And Dr. McKnight, if I could, I would follow up just to say, if everything as we had budgeted, we would have used 257,000 of fund balance.
In some way.
Gotcha.
Ms. Day, if you'll check your phone.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would make a recommendation that we hold off on making a decision and have that meeting on the 13th. We'll know more than we know now about what it's going to be like for school to open, maybe.
Okay. Ms. Day, how does that fit into the timeline for what the budget has to be done? I'm assuming, since we're fairly confident the state will not have a budget by that point, we will be okay to consider this on the 13th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Peace, would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir. I so move that we have this discussion on the 13th, not at 9 o'clock in the morning.
All right.
Yes, sir. Duly noted.
I was going to say, you did hear that, didn't you? All right. So we have a motion by Mr. Peace. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Peace and a second by Mr. Udy that we table this discussion until the board's meeting July 13th, not to be at 9 o'clock in the morning. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
And this is to Mr. Perry or Mr. Winburn or Dr. McLean. I know in years past, if I recall correctly, that we had money for a social worker and we couldn't find any. I mean, there's not a whole lot of them around. If we wait till the 13th, is that going to be a big hindrance in us finding someone if we choose to try to hire an additional one? Or is it you don't anticipate it'll be that much of a detriment?
Dr. Granville.
This is Dr. Stan Winborn. I think you might be referring to the psychologist position. We had that posted for almost a year and couldn't find anybody. But we've hired several social workers just during the course of the past several years, and I don't recall there being a tremendous difficulty.
Okay, so basically putting us off to the 13th, if we decide to go that route, is not going to hurt us too much.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, if you're ready to vote. So again, the motion is to table this item, the budget's use of fund balance, until July 13th when the board meets. If you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, so that passes unanimously. And so Dr. McLean, Ms. Day, if you will make a notation that we will take that back up on July 13th.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
All right.
We need to decide on the time. We don't need to do that today, though.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Since you don't like 9 o'clock, can we do 6:30 in the morning?
That'll be better than 9.
All right. So we are at the point of our meeting to go into closed session. And so I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Is there anybody that's willing to make a motion to go to closed session?
Yes, I'm just trying to do.
Go ahead, Mr. Udy.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into closed session, and I don't have the statutes in here tonight.
143, 318, 11A6, A3, and A5, and a section 115C, 321 for personnel and attorney-client privilege.
That'll be my motion.
All right.
Second.
Do we have a second? That's Mr. Peace. Any further discussion? All right. If you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, we are now into closed session, so we will give the tech team. Okay, all right. We are now in open session. And so our first item of business outside of open session is we'll take a motion to approve the classified personnel as presented. Do we have a pleasure of the board?
Make a motion that we the classified position.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second for that?
Second piece.
All right. We have a motion by Mr. Udy, a second by Mr. Peace to approve classified personnel as presented. Any further discussion? All right. Hear none. If you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes 7-0. All right, next we have to approve our certified personnel that was presented. Do we have a motion for that?
Mr. Udy will make a motion to approve the certified positions.
Okay. Do we have a second for that?
Second, McKnight.
All right. So I have a motion by Mr. Udy, a second by Dr. McKnight to approve the certified personnel as presented. Any further discussion? All right. If you're ready to vote, Ms. Allred?
Yes.
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Dr. McKnight?
Yes.
Mr. Peace?
Yes.
Mr. Udy?
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan?
Yes.
All right. So that motion passes 7-0. Madam Superintendent, do you have any other items that need to be discussed?
No, sir. We will take the comments into consideration that were made tonight about reentry, and we will work up a recommendation or two for the board for our 9 a.m. meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Peace. Our 9 a.m. meeting on the 2nd.
Thank you. I'll tell you what, everybody can have breakfast that day. All right. I have a note here. Mr. Rivers, you wanted to speak for a moment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I had hoped we would be meeting face to face on our last meeting of the school year, and unfortunately we're not, and so I apologize, but at any rate, I think the timing is the right time to proceed. Mr. Chairman, members of the Granville County Board of Education, Madam Superintendent, members of the senior staff, fellow citizens of District 3, and friends. I am reluctantly and sadly announcing my resignation as a member of the Granville County Board of Education, effective September 30th, 2020. This very difficult decision has been over a year in the making and only comes after much thought, prayer, and consultations with family, friends, and the board chair and vice chair. This will give the board a 2-month notice subsequent to our July break to make arrangements for my successor and an opportunity for a smooth transition to a new member. To my fellow citizens of District 3, I will be forever grateful for the trust you placed in me to be your representative on the school board. 14 years ago, my wife Natalie and I chose Granville County in which to live and raise our 2 sons from among all the cities and towns in America. Though we knew no one here and had no ties, from the very first we were warmly welcomed by this wonderful community. We enrolled our sons in the public schools, and both of us immediately volunteered in a variety of ways to support and nurture not only our children, but all of the children in our schools. We felt it was not only a duty, but a privilege and a pleasure to do our part to improve the lives of our young people through strengthening public education. Our sons recently graduated from J.F. Webb School of Health, High School of Health and Life Science as back-to-back valedictorians of their classes. When the opportunity presented itself to serve on the Granville County Board of Education, I accepted the challenge. I believed that as a member of the board, I could utilize my varied career experience, my experience as an active parent of 2 Granville County School students, and my energy and passion for education for the benefit of all of our students. My career experience included over 20 years of educational outreach, STEM development, and minority recruitment for the aerospace profession while serving as a naval aviator, NASA test pilot, engineer, program manager, and consultant. My wife was a NASA flight test engineer as well. I felt that my experience in a STEM career and years of data analysis would be a useful adjunct to the diverse talent and experience on the board. Since my election, I have directed my absolute very best efforts to my duties as a member of the board and will continue to do so until my last day. I have from time to time differed with the administration and some of my colleagues. I have tried to do so honestly, respectfully, and in the spirit of collegiality and goodwill. However, I have regrettably concluded that I can no longer function effectively and productively on the board to the level that I expect. In this decision, I joined 2 other board members who resigned from the board over the past 16 months, possibly having reached similar conclusions regarding their own service. This is not a judgment on or criticism of any person or group. It is simply a fact. As I return to private life, I will continue my interest in and commitment to our schools as a volunteer where my time, energy, and passion can hopefully still make a difference. I care deeply for Granville County Schools and for this community, and I sincerely want every single student to reach their full potential in life. I wish every member of this board, the superintendent and administration, our teachers, teacher assistants, and all of our staff all the very best in perhaps the most important task we have as a nation. A well-educated citizenry is essential for democracy to survive. As Article 9 of our North Carolina Constitution states, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Thank you for allowing me to serve, and may God continue to bless and Granville County Schools. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rivers. I want to be the first to thank you for your service to the school board, and just thank you for the lifelong commitment that you've had to educating children here in Granville County is the time that you've spent with us. So I want to give the opportunity to others if they have something to say.
I'll certainly add, Mr. Richardson, thank you for your service to the Board of Education, Mr. Rivers. We appreciate it.
All right. Mr. Rivers, let me get a point of clarification. Did you say effective September 30th?
That's correct. I wanted to give you all a couple months notice. There's some important things going on this summer, but I didn't want to just drop it on you then. So hopefully this will give the board a chance to start making plans for my successor and for a smooth transition.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I had that down. All right. Attorney Dubison, are you at the point where you would be ready to brief us on what the process we use for replacing a board member upon a resignation?
Sure. So based on the statute, the replacement would be until the next election. Which I believe for District 3 is 2026. I'm sorry, 2022 is your next board election. So the replacement would serve until 2022, and then a successor would be elected until 2024 when the term ends. And which often, is the person who's been sitting in it, but that's up to the voters. So what you did last time the replacement is appointed by the board. And you have a lot of leeway in how you want to do that. What you did last time was to advertise and invite people to apply. And I'm sure that you still have, I don't have a copy of the advertisement, but I'm sure that someone does, and you ask for certain information for them to include in their application letters. And then you I believe, did interviews of those who applied and then voted. And you, of course, would interview and vote in open session.
Okay. Board members, do you have questions for the attorney based on that explanation?
I have just one. We're not able to start that process till he actually leaves. Is that correct? Because he could always rescind that, couldn't he?
Well, I don't know that that would keep you from starting because the person isn't in office until they're sworn in. So
my intent was to allow a smooth transition and to allow District 3 to be fully represented. My last day would be the 30th of September, and I would hope that you would swear in my replacement the first regular meeting in October. And that's why I tried to plan this, and I tried to look at what it took the last time to find a replacement. So that was my thought process, basically giving plenty of notice so you all can move forward smoothly.
And
yeah, I was asking that because I was from the legal point, were we able to look for someone until that actual date is done? Because you are elected and you could always rescind that. And that's why I was just asking, or legally, could we do that? That's why I was asking.
yes, and I think that's fine as long as obviously you don't swear in the new person. And if it would help, I don't know if Mr. Rivers, if you'd be willing to, or if, I mean, the statement that you read, if you would, I guess, submit that to whoever is taking the minutes so they can include it in the minutes. Is that okay?
Certainly.
When we filled the seat of District 1 and then Mr. Mims, we took a good while to do that, did we not?
We took in the applications over the series of a month. And then we had an interview process, I think a week or two after that. And then we deliberated and voted during that. So it was this last time it was a month and a half. The time before that, I think it was 2 or 3 months, because really we were trying to map out the process.
Mm-hmm. And I think the holidays intervened.
Yeah, I think you're right with Mr. Smith. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's no required timeline. You can advertise it as quickly as you want to, or as
potentially it could be done in a month and a half.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Board, what about this? Would you be willing, now that we've heard this request by Mr. Rivers, give me an opportunity to work with the superintendent over the next couple of days and lay out a timeline like we did when we filled Mr. Smith's seat, and then bring that back to you July 2nd to affirm that that's the process you want to use? Would that be permissible?
Sure, I think that's a good way of going. I think, yeah, you get together and then you come back to the board and we'll go from there.
I will ask DeWanda to add it to the notice for Thursday's meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Again, Mr. Rivers, thank you so much. I'm just appreciative of how you've caused us to think and caused us to think in different directions, and appreciate what you've done for Granville County Schools.
Thank you, David, and I appreciate your listening over the past 6 months, and I just appreciate all your help with this. Is very, very difficult decision to make.
Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind, would you forward that document to myself and Dr. McLean and Tondra, or have Dr. McLean send it to Tondra?
I'll do that as soon as we adjourn the meeting.
Okay. All right. Board members, if you see there are dates for you to remember. Again, we do have a board called meeting July 2nd at 9 o'clock. That is virtual. We are on the books for July 13th now for a board work session. Originally, the time's 9 o'clock. We'll work with the superintendent and her staff to determine some alternate times for that. And then we also have a board meeting scheduled August 4th, a regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. Is there any further thing before we adjourn? All right, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so I have a motion by Mr. Peace and a second by Dr. Houlihan to adjourn our meeting. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, Ms. Allward,
Yes.
Mr. Rivers,
Yes.
Dr. McKnight, Dr. McKnight,
Yes. Sorry, I was
Okay.
muted.
sorry, Mr. Peace,
Yes.
Mr. Udy,
Yes.
Dr. Houlihan.
Yes.
All right, that is unanimous. I hope you have a good evening, and we will look forward to seeing you July 2nd. I hear the governor may be making an announcement the day before, so you might want to tune in. So again, thank you for all your work. Staff, thank you for everything that you put in to bringing this information to us tonight. Hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Good night.